What's happening, Stokastic basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. My name's Terry McBride. I am here with the one, the only Rayen Patnaik. Rayen, what's going on, buddy? How are you? How's your basketball season starting?
Yeah, no, it's gearing up. It's always interesting the first month, and especially this season. I do think they've kind of followed that baseball scheduling. It's kind of led to more variance than usual. A lot of teams playing the same team 2 games in a row in the same setting, not even a home and home. So I do think that has resulted in some interesting results. But here we are. It's already almost November. The NBA season really kicks off in Christmas Day. So
yeah,
this is like an extended preseason pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's working out the kinks, figuring out where the pieces fit in their rotations and everything the first couple of months. And yeah, NBA Christmas is the semi-traditional, actual start of the season in my book as well. But it's been a fun start to the season. Like you said, a lot of variance. We've seen some very strange slate size changes. We had a 1-gamer this week, which was an oddball that didn't do me any favors. We've had some really big slates tonight. We're dealing with a little 4-gamer, so it should be nice and easy. We've gotten, I think, most of the injury news out of the way already, so that's going to be nice and easy to talk through. We'll see what else is lurking out there for us, see if there's any surprises in store. But it seems like we got a lot of the info, so we'll talk through. We'll go game by game. Everybody out there, welcome to hanging out in the chat. Throw us your questions. Hello to everybody who's saying hi in there. I see Brandon Katz and Obi-Wan, Steve Leibowitz, and Mark Langford, and a lot of other folks in there. So we're letting everybody trickle in over the next few minutes, but hit the like, hit the subscribe, do us some favors, gives us a little bit of credit in the YouTube algorithms and all that fun stuff, and hitting the subscribe lets you guys know when we're going live. We are brought to you today by our pals at BetMGM. They've got a solid no-brainer bet up for the World Cup. It's one of those, go over there, put $10 on a money line, you automatically cash out $200, and that's if anybody in the World Cup scores. And as low scoring as soccer is, I do believe some goals were scored. Some goals were scored today against the U.S. team, unfortunately. We all woke up early this morning. Did you watch the game this morning, Ryan?
I watched about 10 minutes of the game between the 60th and 70th minute.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I would have loved to see the U.S. win. I just knew you're playing the Netherlands. The Netherlands got so many good European stars. It was going to be a tough to compete against them regardless. But they made things exciting. My roommate was really enthused to watch it, but I chose to focus on some other stuff in the morning.
Yeah, makes some sense. I probably would have at least slept in the extra hour from 9 to 10 had I not had to be on the show, but Adam wanted to watch the game, so we shifted the show this morning to 9 o'clock. Got into the game for sure. I watched most of the U.S. games in the cup here, but it was once they scored 10 minutes or so into it, it was just a rough sledding from there until at least the U.S. made it 2-1. Gave us a couple interesting minutes, like you said, late there, but unfortunate ending for them, but against a really tough opponent. So we'll see what happens with them in the next cup. Supposedly they're young. Do you have a favorite going forward in the World Cup that anybody you're rooting for? Are you watching it at all?
Man, I just want to see Portugal versus Argentina. Okay. As just a sports fan, you just want to see like that head-to-head for all the marbles. Look, those two are like 1A and 1B in Messi and Ronaldo, but that's just like grab your popcorn and let's just watch this happen.
Yeah, just go for the event television of it, the event spectacle. I like it. That seems like a good one to root for sure, and a couple powerhouse teams. So it should be a fun one though. It looks like the bracket lays out nicely, some interesting squads in there. But we've got an NBA slate to talk about. We're going to dive in here game by game. Anything jumping out to you off the top in terms of the injury news? Like we got SGA is going to be in. That was a big piece, I know. What's standing out to you? What are you waiting on, and what's come through that's kind of had an impact for you so far?
Yeah, the SGA news is huge. I mean, SGA has been absolutely monster, all NBA player so far, in my opinion, to start off the season. And interesting news also in Orlando, as Markelle Fultz has returned for the team. That does change up things a little bit. They still have a bunch of guys who are out, so that's an interesting place to target. We already got some news in Golden State as Klay Thompson has been ruled out. They're on a back end of a back-to-back. And Portland continues to be out without Dame Lillard. So there are bits and news bits in every single game where it makes for an intriguing 4-game slate where there's like relevant news across the board.
Yep.
And I don't think we'll get much. The McLaughlin news is a little questionable. Maybe that doesn't really matter much as I think more about it, but it's the SGA news was huge because I do think that changed the whole slate really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam and I were talking about that a little bit this morning, and I just sorted both sites by salary just to look at some of the top players. And without SGA on the board, it was Steph Curry alone and separated by like 2,000, 1,500 from the other players and separated by a good amount on projection. With SGA in there, you've at least got somebody in a competitive salary tier, a different direction to go, and another star caliber, top 10 kind of a player. So that's great to have in there. Any lurking pieces? I know you said, basically everything that we really care about is in. We know that no Klay Thompson for the Warriors tonight. Any thoughts towards any of those other guys resting, or do you think since they announced Klay and kind of went with everybody else that we're just getting the rest of these guys in?
Yeah, I think it's Klay. I don't think any one of these coaches can pull a fast one on us up until tip off. So be cautious with them just because they're on a back end of a back-to-back. But I'm just proceeding with the news we have and trusting the news we have with only Klay being out. And I expect Draymond and Steph to just play in a Houston matchup, which is very intriguing on the other side of things, which will be fun to break down. As Steve Kerr has yet again changed up his bench rotation, which has been very difficult to understand what's happening there. But I think he might have found something that works.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to get into, and a nice meaty total in that one, 235. So we'll talk about that one in just a little bit. But why don't we start off at the top of the board here? We'll go to the OKC and Minnesota game. So let me sort here, and I'll do this to sort by optimal lineups here, and then one more time to sort by teams. Now I got my dashboard set up the way I want it. Sorry about that, gang. So we've got OKC at Minnesota. OKC, like we said, coming in with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in tow. Minnesota favored by 5. Nice meaty 233 total in this one. What are we seeing on the OKC side of things? When Adam and I talked to Slate through this morning, we were looking at some of the potential value that could emerge around a Josh Giddey, somebody like that, some of the other guys on this team if Shai didn't play. But with him out there, we were both kind of decidedly saying it's really him and then a lot of just kind of odds and ends pieces rather than some really appealing things. Outside of SGA, does anything really pop for you? And then, dive into SGA all you want.
So these guys are kind of priced in a situation where SGA is out because of how crazy Mark Daigneault is with that rotation. For me, it's just SGA. I mean, it's SGA 10-3, 10-7, and 49 across DK, FanDuel, and Yahoo, respectively. He looks like a fine player to go to. And on a 4-game slate, he's one of those guys who can be the highest scoring player on the slate. And when that usually happens, you're going to need him. Yes, he's going to be competing against some solid guys in potentially Steph Curry. And I think he's up there in the top 3 or 4 guys that I think will be in the highest scoring players on the slate. Now, if you want to take flyers on the other members of the team, Josh Giddey has that potential within him. 7-5 on DK and FanDuel. Prefer that on FanDuel more than in DK. $28 on Yahoo is just, it's okay. Nothing that excites me. And then everyone else, I'm just not about it because with SGA coming back, the offense goes through him. He's kind of there, Luka, because he just soaks up so much of their offense. And it's really tough to pinpoint any one of these guys in confidence because Mark Daigneault, we've seen it. Well, he'll have a starting lineup and he comes up in the second half and has a completely different rotation than he did in the first half. So as we play DFS, that makes things really hard to project in confidence. But I do think on a 4-game slate, taking a flyer on guys who have some upside, is it a Jalen Williams, a Poku, or a Dort? You can in 150 lineups. I think you can definitely fall on them. You're not getting much ownership, but it's a high risk, high reward situation with those 3 guys. I think I would prefer Williams and Pokusevski just because of the salary savings, 4.7 and 4.8 on DK, while Jalen Williams also 4.8 on FanDuel. Williams is a talented offensive player. It's kind of raw, but I've always said it's tough being a rookie when you have to share a court with an all-NBA player. It's just really hard for rookies to find their groove right off the bat, especially a guy like Williams. I think SGA is the guy here, and everyone else is just shrug your shoulders and kind of move on, not a priority.
Yeah, just that's kind of how they're coming through in the sim that I just ran and the results as I'm looking through that. A lot of odds and ends, like I said, around, a couple shares here and there of Dort. More shares probably of Giddey as I look through the overall here. And then a guy like Jalen Williams, who when I ran this morning after getting off the show, I was getting a decent amount of him because I ran it with SGA off. He looked all right. He looked like he was going to provide some potential value there. We've got him projected at 27 minutes, but the unpredictable nature of the rotation and just, like you said, it's just difficult for him to, necessarily fit in, necessarily get the looks he'll need to really hit an upside score. 0.79 in points per minute in a FanDuel sense so far for the year. Gave us 34.2 and 33.4 the last time out, but it's tough to rely on that. And it's tough to find any real upside outside of SGA here. He does look like he's projected out as one of the top overall just raw scoring plays. He's coming up as one of our most frequently optimal plays. This is SGA I'm talking about here, especially on the FanDuel side of things at 10-7 shooting guard and point guard. He's coming up about 33% optimal on the FanDuel slate, significantly less than that, but still very relevant on the DK slate at 10-3 point guard only. So we're getting a decent share of them. What I like about SGA on both sites right now in our tools, he's coming up as positively leveraged on both sites. So that's definitely interesting. If the field's going to leave him on the table, even if it's just a few shares, that's a spot I'll definitely want to gobble up with so few high scoring options on this slate. Do you think that's a product of just the Q tag earlier and that the public's going to catch up on that? Or do you think that he'll end up going under owned?
On a 4-game slate, he can certainly end up going over owned. SGA is one of those guys I feel like a lot of models and DFS projections in general were behind on his assertion of just driving in the lane, being efficient. He's been a different player so far this season. So I do think he'll come in a little bit under owned just because of the new upside SGA has. He has been not on par with Luka, but it's been like Luka light in the sense of his production fantasy wise. So it's been really impressive to see. And he really does not want Wembanyama out of France. He just wants to win games, clearly.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he's playing his way out of that high lottery pick. But
then again, Presti has 12 picks just to like dish out to the team who wins the lottery. So.
That's a fair point. He could just compile whatever he wants and just say, all right, how many more is it going to take? How many more is it going to take? I want Victor. But that's SGA is also, and I was joking earlier in the season, and it's just so true. He's turning himself into a super duper star just in time for the New York Post to start spreading rumors that the Knicks are going to be trading for him and et cetera, just to continue teasing us Knicks fans and messing with us like they've been doing for the last 25, 30 years now. But yeah, 1.44 FanDuel points per minute for SGA on 32.4% usage. Nothing not to love about that. That seems like a guy I'll go to again and again on this slate, especially if he ends up under owned in the next hour and change. Looking at the other side of this one, we know no Karl Anthony Towns, obviously out for like 6 weeks with an extended injury, but we've got Kyle Anderson popping to the very top of the board on both sites in terms of optimal lineup rate, in terms of boom score probability based on his price, his positioning. I've got just an uncomfortable amount of Kyle Anderson in my lineup so far. We've got D'Lo, we've got Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards, some Jalen Noel. There's some interesting pieces on this Minnesota team. What are you doing with the T-Wolves here?
T-Wolves are very, very interesting. Obviously, no Cat, who soaks up a ton of usage. And whenever Cat's been gone, I do think Anthony Edwards is their lead usage guy. And let alone on a 4-game slate, you want to chase the upside. I think Anthony Edwards has the highest upside on this team. But now there's also salary to this. He comes in at 8.6 on both on DK and FanDuel, while comes in at a very favorable $36 on Yahoo. I like that quite a bit. And I like Anthony Edwards a lot. I do think Anthony Edwards will have games where he shoots the ball somewhere in the high 20s, just because with no Cat, he's their best offensive player on this team. Now, it's an Oklahoma City team, and I do think we can go to Gobert, who was awfully disappointing last game. $6,900, $7,200. I like that price tag on both, especially on FanDuel where you can only roster one center. I don't mind going to Gobert. There'll be some solid games out of Gobert without Cat. And just not to say he gets that much of a usage bump because of Gobert's game, but I just think the opportunity against Oklahoma City puts him in a position to produce and perform over that salary that we have for him. With no Cat, and I think D'Angelo Russell gets a sneaky bump here as well. This whole team looks awesome. Leading to the point here, I'm not that interested in going to Kyle Anderson at the ownership. Look, he played a ton of minutes. He was awesome last game. But we've been playing Kyle Anderson at much cheaper price tags, and this wide range of outcomes with Kyle Anderson is like, he could put up 15 fantasy points and he could put up 35 fantasy points. I do think I forget how many minutes he played last game, but he played a ton of minutes and I forgot how many it was. But if I want to play Kyle Anderson, it's probably going to be the $13 price tag on Yahoo. Everywhere else, I'm willing to look elsewhere. Yes, he's good salary relief, but I'm skeptical with slow-mo at all times. But he does probably fall into your cash game lineup, but I'm very skeptical at this extremely high ownership for Kyle Anderson.
I mean, and it's the exact situation where he's kicked the shit out of us so many times, not getting there when he's popular, when it seems like a Kyle Anderson obvious kind of a night. Like, he's just done this so many times. If there's a guy on the slate that's just a hot stove, don't touch sign, I think it's Kyle Anderson tonight, but everybody's reaching for him. And I think, like I said, I've got an uncomfortable amount right now. My hand would be scalded badly right now if that was the case. He's sitting at 52% boom score probable, pushing 50% optimal on the FanDuel slate at his $4,700 price tag. Small forward and power forward eligible. 43% optimal on the DK slate for 4,400 small forward and power forward eligible. It's just difficult to get away from him. So it technically, by the numbers, if we're looking at FanDuel on that board, he's technically positively leveraged over there just because of how crazy optimal he is by our numbers. 39% ownership against that 49% optimal rate. Still very dicey. I just do not trust Kyle Anderson now. Like you're saying, on DK, it's easier to get away from. He's got negative leverage. He's owned appropriately to his optimal rates, so a little bit easier to get away there. I'm stuck on the FanDuel slate. I'm going to be wrestling with this one, I think, as we're going in. Any love for like a Jalen Noel, who's coming in the mid-20s on the FanDuel slate, but pushing up towards 40% optimal on DK? Definitely an interesting piece, but projected only for about 25 minutes tonight. We've got Jaden McDaniels also on the board here. What about the ancillary pieces for Minnesota?
I like Jalen Noel. I think if you were to tell me if I can only roster either Kyle Anderson or Jalen Noel, I like Jalen Noel because he has more of an ability to create an offensive game than Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson, you're hoping for some peripheral stats. You're hoping for like some steals and blocks and some assists there. While Jalen Noel has more of an offensive game, and that's the quicker and safer way to fantasy points, in my opinion. So Jalen Noel looks like a fine option to go to. I know the minutes, be aware, because they couldn't get fluctuated. He did come off the bench last game, 4,300, 5,100. He might come in a bit lower owned than we expect, I believe, just because of the price hike. He's only $14 on Yahoo. That's fine to take some chances on. I do like Noel. And if I'm not mistaken, Terry, do you know off the top of your head if he closed last game? It was a weird situation because there was a bunch of ejections in for the Memphis side of things, and that kind of changed up the whole game at the end. I think Morant ended up getting a fine. Dylan Brooks got ejected, so there's a lot that went down towards the end there.
Yeah, this is where my goldfish level memory tends to hurt me in remembering who was wearing some of the rotations. Fortunately, Popcorn Machine is a thing, and I just pulled them up. Let's see. This is from the 30th. I don't know that this was their last game though. Didn't they play since then?
They played
yesterday I forget.
No, I don't think they played
yesterday. No. Well, it looks like in this one on the 30th, Noah played the entire fourth quarter.
Wow. So based on that result alone, I remember he played a ton of minutes and he was
this looks like Kyle Anderson, D'Lo, Rudy Gobert, and Noel played the entire fourth quarter, and then Anthony Edwards played the bulk of the fourth quarter.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I like that. That's another reason why I think taking your chances. Look, he's getting a ton of ownership at the $4,300 on DraftKings, but I rather would take my chances with Noel than Kyle Anderson just because of that offensive creation he has within him. But keep in mind, that's a ton of ownership still going to him on DraftKings.
Yep. I think I think it makes sense to take a look at him at the very least. And I'm very much with what you're saying. It's something I've been trying to focus on, especially with pieces of like emergent late value. I'm trying to pay attention to creators of fantasy points versus collectors of fantasy points. Big men who just have to fall into a few rebounds. I don't run out of my way for quite as much in a value sense at the last minute as like a point guard who suddenly emerges into a starting lineup or something like that. A guy who can call his own number or create his own opportunities. So that's something I've been focusing on a little bit this year.
I definitely want to touch on the point that Jordan McLaughlin is going to be available today. So that is pretty important news where they're still kind of shorthanded in the backcourt. They only have Austin Rivers, also part of the backcourt. I don't expect Bryn Forbes to get many minutes. We did see Wendell Moore start the game last time, which was really weird. If I'm not mistaken, the rookie. Mm-hmm. So keep an eye on the starting lineup. It might be different today just because of the situation of them trying to figure out how to play without Cat. McLaughlin there, he might take away for some backcourt offensive duty from Noel, but I'm just trying to like see the counter argument of not to play Jalen Noel. So
So
McLaughlin
more
being
a
in,
spot where McLaughlin might knock him down a peg, but it's not a spot where you're saying, consider McLaughlin really. We've got him projected right now about 14 minutes.
yeah, it's a 4-game slate, small enough where you want to take a flyer on McLaughlin, but seems a little too cute in my opinion. But I'm just seeing like
little thin. But anything else from this
one? I do
one?
expect a different rotation for Minnesota because of I don't expect Wendell Moore to start again. I think he started last time.
Yeah. All right. We'll keep an eye on that. And we've got the live before lock crew coming up after us. So they'll be all over that one, of course. Let's move along unless there's anything else from this one. We'll pop over to the next game on deck. We're probably already behind schedule, but that's all right. Got Orlando and Toronto coming up. 11-point spread. Orlando coming into Toronto as 11-point dogs. 221 total in this one. What are we seeing from the Orlando side of things as far as what the rotation looks like? What's the big news from Orlando?
Yeah, the Orlando side of things, obviously, Markelle Fultz is back. While they're missing some of their front court guys in Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter, Jalen Suggs continues to be out. Chuma Okeke is also out. Gary Harris, I believe, is also out. So last night we saw Mo Wagner start. Wagner comes in at $47 and $4,200. $11 in Yahoo looks like a fine option to take some chances on Mo. But his brother, Franz Wagner, much more expensive, but $6,700 FanDuel, 64 on DK. He's fine to take some chances on. It's not the greatest spot. I do think he will have some trouble on the opposing side of things going up against OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Siakam. He might struggle in that situation. Banchero, the same situation, comes in at 8,200, 7,700. He hasn't looked as impressive and explosive like he did in the first couple of weeks of the season since that injury. $32 on Yahoo definitely looks like a solid option to take some chances on. Great tournament play. He obviously has that upside. Very elite talent, but tough matchup on the other side of things. And I'm willing to maybe go under the field on him. I'm got to make a stand with him in that situation. Banchero, tough matchup. I'd rather take my salary savings with Mo Wagner in that front court. Wagner, the only guy who really sticks out to me. Everyone else is really tough for me to go in any sort of confidence. Markelle Fultz is getting some sort of ownership. I want to stay away. That's a little tough for me to go to with him coming back from injury. Not the greatest usage, I think, for Fultz yet. $13 on Yahoo, sure, but seems like there are better spots in game situations for other guys on the slate.
Yeah, Fultz and Cole Anthony both playing on the second night of a back-to-back. What are you expecting minutes-wise? We've got it projected out right now, 23.2 for Fultz, Cole Anthony 27.7. Do you see that basically falling around those numbers, like 24, 28 kind of a split?
Yeah, I think the range of outcomes for Fultz could be anywhere from like 20 to 25, while Cole Anthony, I think, could be anywhere from 24 to like 30 maybe, just because of Fultz coming back from a much more serious injury than Cole Anthony. It's like if you want to take some chances, take some chances in the front court where they're missing guys. That's why I think Mo sticks out to me the most.
Yeah, and Mo standing up at the top of the board on both sites for us. Strong optimal rates, strong boom score probabilities across both sites. Definitely getting a little bit of leverage on the FanDuel slate, I'd say. I was going to say good, but it's not really good. It's a tiny sliver of positive leverage on FanDuel, appropriately negatively leveraged on the DK slate, but similar ownership across both sites in the 30-ish% range. Definitely an interesting play, though. Banchero is negatively leveraged on the FanDuel slate, kind of extremely. He's only 12% optimal over there, 20.8% owned, 7,700 both forward positions eligible. I like the look of him a little bit better for the higher price, even though he's less optimal, lower boom score probability, just because he's in a raw sense only owns 7.6% of the time on DK. So if I'm just looking for some raw upside, some raw scoring, I'll take him at 7%, pay a little bit more for him over there. I think that makes a little bit more sense rather than taking on that negative weight of leverage. I'll have him in some lineups, but I think it just takes a little bit of the appeal away from him there. Is that how you're seeing Banchero?
Yeah.
As far as FanDuel goes anyway?
FanDuel 7,700. Yeah, that's how I'm thinking. Look, he has an upside, and maybe I'm discounting that a little too much in the situation we're placing. I'm just really skeptical on the matchup he has. So that's why I'm like down on Banchero. Yeah. Even at that price, like looks appealing. Like I do think Banchero is an 8K player, just like for this rookie season. Can he have the upside to make that 8K to 9K jump? Do you think that's a pretty significant jump there? I do think he's priced around his appropriate / stealing, in my opinion.
Yeah. So with that, it'll just be a matter of watching that leverage or that ownership. I'd love to see that FanDuel ownership come down a little bit because I do want to get to him at that price. I think there's appeal there. Let's talk real quick on we've got Mo Wagner, like we said. We've also got Bol. And Adam and I talked this through a little bit this morning. The minutes after he started, showing out a little bit, giving us something to have, some attachment to as far as DFS goes, with 1.06 FanDuel points per minute so far this season. Minutes have come back a little bit. Upsides come down a little bit, and the price is still kind of priced for the old minutes. So, what do you think of Bol in this situation with no Bamba and all those that front court shakeup?
Yeah, tournaments. Fine to take some flyers on Bol. Can Bol just rack up a ton of blocks and help you on FanDuel and Yahoo at $25 and $6,700? Yeah, there's definitely a pathway for him to pull that off. Like, do I prefer Bol to Banchero at that ownership discount? Look, it's completely different positions, center only, and it's tough. I would rather go to Gobert. Like, Gobert seems like a much more safer play. Seems like more potential higher minutes, better matchup. It's tough for me to have a ton of interest in Bol. Look, this has been an exciting turnaround for Bol from him getting traded from Denver to Detroit not passing his physical, and then landing in Orlando, kind of showing him why he was that potential lottery talent. Mm-hmm. And it's been impressive to see that. But tonight for DFS, I think I gotta stay away. There's just better options, and it's a long shot tournament flyer only for Bol for me.
Yeah, that's where he maybe claws back a little bit of his value to me. Is he's under 5% owned on FanDuel, he's under 2% owned on DK. So just because he's so low owned in a raw sense, maybe I can throw in some tournament darts on him. But yeah, it was a little bit less appealing in terms of where he was priced out. If he was going to be a little bit more popular than that, it would feel a little bit more chasey. But I do think we can get a little sliver of upside at that low raw ownership. Anything else from this one that we need to call out before we move on? Got a little business to knock out here.
Keep an eye on the starting lineup. I know it's a Toronto matchup.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about the Toronto side. I was ready to move us on from this game. we are just
behind. Keep an eye on.
All right, yeah. Talk to me about the Toronto side. OG Anunoby looking solid up at the top. A lot of positive leverage on him. Siakam, Scotty Barnes, kind of back to their typical rotation, their typical health here. So let's take the Toronto Raptors, and then we'll go to a quick plug.
Yeah, no, Fultz, Wagner, Banchero, Mo Wagner, Bol are the starters for the Orlando Magic. So just wanted to let everyone know that. But yeah, on the Toronto side of things, I'm all about this team. I think they're coming in a little bit under-owned. I love going to Siakam, Van Vliet. Those guys look excellent. Gary Trent Jr. has been falling off the bench. I don't think that's sustainable, but I like Siakam and Van Vliet quite a bit. $9,500 and $7,200 on DraftKings. They both look outstanding. I don't even mind doing Siakam at 9.9 on FanDuel as well. Van Vliet 8K seems fine to take some chances on in this Orlando matchup. Well, OG is the guy who's, in my opinion, is just priced a little too expensive, where I probably, with the field here, they aren't getting too much of him. But Scotty Barnes, I'm willing to take some chances on as well. $71 and $7,300 comes in at 28 on Yahoo. They're kind of a big three / big four. I have no issues taking some flyers on Gary Trent Jr., where you get the 3-point bonus. Looks like a sneaky tournament play, kind of your Kyle Anderson pivot, your Jalen Noel pivot. And Gary Trent Jr. can get that 3-point bonus in a hurry over there on DraftKings. 6,100 on FanDuel seems a little too cute for me. It's an elevated price
different
tag.
Place site to site with Trent.
Yeah, agreed. And that's starters only here. No real reason for me to go to Boucher or Christian Coloco. Those guys will have their days when these Nick Nurse gives these guys rest days, their main guys at least.
Yeah, and I think that's the case here for me as well. I'm probably just going to be focusing on the starters and probably just the top end of it with Siakam and OG coming up the most for me so far, and then shares of Scotty Barnes, Fred Van Vliet mixed in. Site to site, how many Raptors is too many Raptors? Would you go 4? Or would you go have no max? What's your consideration here?
I'm probably always on an island on this. I'm on a site to site basis. If I get to 4 Raptors on FanDuel, that's certainly fine with me. Yes, there's some negative correlation there over a long period of time, but sometimes when you're building a lot of lineups, all you need is one. Do I play 4 Raptors in one lineup? Unlikely, because all of these guys are in. But it's a great matchup, and it depends on what Raptors you're playing. Like on DraftKings, can you play Trent Jr., Siakam, and Van Vliet, those three guys together, yeah, I think that's completely fine. And mixing it in with some chalk, I think it's okay to do, no issues. And I'm probably on an island where I'm okay getting to a lot of players on one team.
Yep, I think that makes some sense, especially 4-game slate and a slate where, you know, there's some short positions like center on FanDuel, especially with Siakam having center eligibility. If you slid him into the center spot over on FanDuel and loaded up a couple other pieces from the Raptors, I'd be perfectly fine with that. And I don't think you're necessarily making a mistake. I'm sort of with you. I tend to try and keep things to 3 instead of 4 on the FanDuel slates. But if I get 4 on, especially on a small one like this, I'm typically totally fine with it. And I like to just go where the math takes me in a lot of senses. I try to not limit too many things artificially like that. So as long as the math bears it out, I think we're fine to play it. Let's jump into a quick piece of business because we are definitely behind 2 games to go after this. But let me tell you guys about BetMGM No-Brainer Bet. Bet $10. I plugged this at the top of the show. Go to BetMGM, bet $10 on any money line for the World Cup. You win $200 if any team in the World Cup scores a goal. That's already happened, guys. I know they're few and far between, but I know that for sure that it's already happened because I saw the Netherlands do it to the US 3 times today. Click the link in the description down there somewhere. There's a pinned comment that'll help you guys get signed up. The bet has to be on a pregame money line. It's paid out in free bets. If this deal here is essentially that if any team scores a goal, which has already happened, you get $200 for your $10 bet. It's for first-time depositors only, pregame money line only. So make sure you're getting that on the right situation there. I'm just reading through. There's a lot of weird marketing stuff that just shouldn't be written into this plug because I accidentally almost read it on the air. But that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is go make a quick $200 over at BetMGM with their no-brainer bet, guys. Couldn't be easier. Follow the link in the description below. They'll help you out. There's different states and so on and so forth where it's not eligible, but you'll find that out when you click the link. Let's see what else is on here because we're going to fly through these next 2 games back to back. NBA 3 free days. There's a link for this in the description below as well. So when you're going down to the BetMGM one, make sure you open another tab with this one as well, because you can get 3 free days of Stokastic NBA. And that's everything that we're talking about here, guys. That's the boom bust data. That's the optimal lineup rates. It's ownership. It's projections, the 1v1 tools, the lineup generator, the top stacks, every single piece of content. 3 free days of Stokastic NBA. Join the community, jump in, sign up for our Discord, jump in there, say hello, ask some questions. It's a great community, great way to get started with Stokastic with 3 free days of NBA. So a couple links for you guys down there in the description. If you're going to the site, also make sure you're checking out the lineup generator. Great way to build winning lineups for any NBA DFS contest. You can do the lineups in seconds. You can export them for any of your uploads to any of the different sites that you build them for. You get a big edge on your opponents using Stokastic data through our lineup generator. That knocks out several pieces of business, which is good because we've got 20 minutes to talk about these last 2 games now. We'll go back and circle through and plug those guys one more time. But let's talk Houston Rockets, Golden State Warriors. No Klay Thompson for the Warriors. 233.5 total, 10.5 point dogs for the Rockets coming in. What are we seeing on the Houston side of this one to start us out?
Yeah, the Houston side of things, we can always count on some of their lead guys in 1A and 1B and KPJ and Jalen Green. I always prefer Jalen Green to KPJ, usually because of the price savings. I do think Jalen Green has usually a higher upside just because of the shot volume he might get. And the savings is nice even on Yahoo. You just save $3 to Green off of KPJ. Granted, there's more facilitation involved for KPJ. Jalen Green more points dependent, but 6,500 on FanDuel looks like a solid option to go to for Jalen Green. Alfred Şengün, an uber talented center. If he can hold himself defensively, I do think we'll be rostering him a lot for many years to come. I like him 6,200 on DraftKings a lot. 6,900 on FanDuel. It's at him or Gobert. It's close. I do think Gobert might come in a little bit lower owned for the upside he might put together. Şengün, there's a way where Steve Kerr might want to put Steph and him on an island where Şengün might get played off the court, but maybe I'm overthinking the situation there where if they do attack Şengün defensively, there is a small chance that could happen just because of how talented Steph is in the isolation just to play him off the court. Mm-hmm. Jabari Smith, 5,500. He's playing much better late, 5,300, shooting the 3 more effectively. I do think he is, for his talent, he should be much better than he has been so far. Kind of been an adjustment, I guess, playing alongside guys like KPJ and Jalen Green. 5,300 on FanDuel. I like going to. I know he's going to be a little bit low owned, but I just want to kind of ride potentially his surge. Like, I do think Jabari Smith should be producing much better numbers than he is. I know he's been starting off his rookie campaign a bit slow, but I want to take some chances with Jabari Smith tonight for sure. Everyone else on this team is not that interesting. Tari Eason always has an upside when given the appropriate minutes. You're really hoping for him to produce at outlier rates to pay off a $4,100 and $4,400 price tag. It's kind of like you're hoping to him to outperform Kyle Anderson at that price tag. I don't know. When you're going to get 15, 20 more minutes out of slow-mo, I don't know if Easton seems a little too cute.
Yeah, that was one that came up on the show this morning with Adam. I was kind of just fishing around for some potential guys that maybe, on a value sense could jump into a few additional minutes here. And he looks really appealing, Eason. 4,400 small forward on FanDuel, 41 power forward on the DK slate. I just like the points per minute, 1.11 in a FanDuel sense, 1.07 on the DK side of things. That's a nice per minute rate for a guy at that price. It's just the lack of minutes. We've got him projected now at 19.8. I think he was like 18.7 earlier this morning. So picked up a little bit less than a minute throughout the course of the day. But yeah, we would need 24-ish, 26-ish, and I just don't know that we're going to get there with him today. I do like the Şengün call. I'm actually getting, it looks like in the sim that I ran, it looks like I'm getting more Nurk and getting more Gobert than I am Şengün. So I'm going to want to take a look at that because I do think I want to get to a little bit more Şengün, particularly only 10% owned on the FanDuel slate. Seems like an opportunity there. So I'm going to look at that, maybe give him a little bit of a nudge. He's 16% owned on DK, but still positively leveraged. So a nice situation around Şengün there. And then Jalen Green, KPJ, I'll definitely take my upside shares of those guys. I like the scoring potential from both of them. On the Golden State side, we know there's no Clay, but we should have Steph, Wiggins, Draymond, some Jordan Poole for sure up at the top of the board here. Nice positive leverage numbers on Jordan Poole on both sides as it stands right now. Do you expect that to catch up on Poole? And then just what are you doing with the Warriors here in general?
Yeah, no Klay Thompson here. I know Poole looks great. I do prefer Wiggins to Poole by a little bit. It's close on both sides. I'm honestly 6,500 and 5,900. 6,100 on FanDuel, 6,500 on DraftKings. While Jordan Poole looks outstanding, don't get me wrong, 58 and 5,900. This was his role all season long last year. I do think he has been kind of struggled to come off the bench. Maybe the starter role fits him a bit better going forward. As in for tonight. Jordan Poole looks fine to take your chances on. I think he might get a little bit over-owned by the time the game starts around. I'm not sure, but Jordan Poole obviously has that upside. But playing alongside Steph Curry, and he should never get overlooked. Steph Curry has been amazing, putting up his best numbers, even outside of his unanimous MVP season, which has been amazing to watch. Steph Curry, only $47 on Yahoo. Looks great. 3-point bonus on DK. Yeah, I'm going to be willing to go above the field on Steph Curry tonight. No Clay there. He looks outstanding in my opinion. Other than the front court guys, Green and Looney, I just shrugged my shoulders. Draymond Green has been playing better fantasy-wise. There have been games where he's been putting up 40-plus fantasy points, and especially on FanDuel where his steals and blocks kind of rewards Draymond's game, 6,300 in this Houston game environment. Looks pretty solid to take some chances on. Now, the bench, there's some sneaky guys off this bench because of their salary, and it's their pivots off the Minnesota guys. Guys like your DiVincenzo, Jonathan Kuminga is getting more trust out of Steve Kerr of late, 3,400 and 4K on DraftKings and FanDuel, respectively, only $11 on Yahoo. Kuminga, I believe, almost closed the game against Dallas, and I don't necessarily think that happens, but there's a smidge chance that could happen. And Kuminga, extremely raw talent. He does some awful game decisions where it drives Steve Kerr nuts. But I'm willing to bet on Kuminga over a long period of time that he figures it out. And at that price tag, I'm willing to take some chances on. Yes, it's thin, but I think the minutes could be in the mid-20s tonight.
Yeah, we've got him projected at 16-8, but when you factor everything in, second night of a back-to-back, and some of these guys, maybe getting a couple additional minutes rest in a game where they're probably going to be lighting up the Rockets, they're certainly, enough of a point spread there to suggest that there's going to be a big blowout. Additional fourth quarter run and maybe additional third quarter run, and throughout the game, maybe an additional run in a spot in the rotation for a guy like Kuminga. So I can definitely see going to some of that value on the bench for Golden State here. If you were building a lineup, let's say on DK, and it ended up your two Warriors in that lineup were Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins together, is that a lineup that you would keep, or is that a lineup you'd want to dig into a little bit and see what's going on with it and maybe rebuild it?
I think it's fine. I think it's completely fine.
Okay.
They're both pathways. They can put up 35 to 40 points, and that results on Steph potentially not having a great game. Look, it's a Houston matchup. I mean, this is like a recipe for success, and I have no issues. There are multiple pathways. Both Poole and Wiggins can pay that off. Wiggins can get more active on the boards. There's a potential of him getting that double-double bonus. Jordan Poole can get obviously real saucy with his handle and pull up a bunch of threes, get that 3-point bonus on DraftKings. Yeah, I'm completely fine falling on both of them. Yeah, at a certain point, like there's probably negative correlation, but in the Houston matchup, there are many, many pathways. Both of those guys can pay off that price tag.
Yeah, and there's enough raw scoring that any negative correlation is just going to be negated by the amount of available scoring for these two, I think. So yeah, that's one I'd be happy to chase. Definitely want to get over the field on Steph Curry in this situation, though. Like you said, it just looks like a ripe opportunity for Steph. Even if he shaves a couple minutes off the total, I feel like if they're lighting this team up, it's probably because he made a good handful of threes. It's probably because he's out there doing Steph Curry things for 3.5 quarters. So I'm not really worried about the minutes allocation here. I think he looks perfectly fine at the top of the board. We do have Shea in there salary-wise competing with him as an alternative option from the superstar end. But yeah, load me up with some Steph Curry here. Let's see what else is on the board. Looks like we rounded this one out pretty well. So we got a few minutes to talk about the next game. Looks like Wiggins is getting a lot of discussion in the chat right now. Wiggins and Poole both getting discussion. Somebody saying, Teddy White saying Wiggins is the reason that Golden State won the chip. Somebody else was saying, don't we remember the Timberwolves version of Andrew Wiggins, who is a very different player at this point in his career. That's an interesting little chat going on there. Let's jump over to the next game. Portland Trailblazers, 5-point dogs going into Utah, 227.5 total. Another decent total. Two fairly interesting teams. A lot of moving parts and interesting pieces on these teams. Like I mentioned, I'm getting a good amount of Nurk. I expect that I've got a good amount of the Jazz just kind of up and down in these lineups as I start going through them. So what do you like from the Portland side of this one?
I love Anthony Simons. He's been Dame light whenever Dame's not on the court. And 3-point bonus for Anthony looks awesome. Sign me up for some Anthony Simons. Man, the highlight of this team without Dame has been Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant has been exceptional in terms of fantasy. And I believe he dropped a 45 piece against your Knicks, Terry. Like Jeremy Grant,
we don't want to talk about that. We don't need to bring that up. It just say the total. You don't need to mention who it came against.
I mean, look, Grant's been awesome of late.
Yeah, he really has.
I don't think this is sustainable. Unless if Jeremy Grant has turned himself into this has been really impressive. I'm willing to shy away from Jeremy Grant, $7,700, $8,200. Rather take some chances and spend down at the forward spots a little bit and spend up in the guard spots. That's kind of how I feel my roster construction might pan out by the time game starts. Anthony Simons is only $30 on Yahoo. That is an awesome play, in my opinion. He looks great. Winslow has been carrying the ball a lot. Up now at 5,200 on DK. I like it. 5,600 on FanDuel for this role seems appropriate. Getting a lot of minutes. Look, he can fill up the stat sheet in multiple ways. This team across the board is getting ownership. We saw Trendon Watford get the start last game. He's cheap. I like him. I think I prefer Watford to that slow-mo price tag, slow-mo's projection. I think Watford looks like an option where we can definitely take your chances on. Shaedon Sharpe, uber talented guy who didn't play a year. He didn't play at Kentucky, but it's a little raw. He might get some ownership. Raw in the sense his fantasy production is raw. But $3,500 is $3,500. He might find a way to get hot and pay off that price tag. The minutes are there, but he doesn't do enough in terms of fantasy production, in my opinion, to pay us off there. You mentioned Nurk. Yeah, Nurk looks solid. 6,700, 6,500. A nice Gobert pivot. Nice, just a center option tonight on tonight's slate. This Portland team might be my favorite team to target tonight, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. And it looks like the numbers are bearing that out. Certainly my sim is bearing that out. Several of these guys are at the top of my ownership board. Nurk is there. Watford basically looks like the value play du jour, especially if you're not considering Kyle Anderson on the same salary tier. And 3,900 power forward for Watford on FanDuel, 3,700 power forward and center eligible on the DK slate. Very, very nice piece in terms of his optimal rate, his boom score probability in our tools, over 40 and 30% in both categories from site to site, and positively leveraged. It's very popular, 24% owned on FanDuel, over 30% owned on DK, but still positively leveraged just because of how much value he's providing at that salary. We've got him projected at 30.5 minutes. Do you see anything in the cards that could knock that minutes expectation down to a 22, a 24, something like that, where we're not going to have an opportunity to get our value out of him?
For Watford, yeah. I mean, I do think he might get the blunt force of Lauri Markkanen and Kelly Olynyk on the other side of things, right? So that is Lauri Markkanen's well on his way to repping that Utah Jazz in the All-Star weekend. So I think you got to be aware on the opposition of what that looks like for Watford. High usage guys, when you're defending a bunch of high usage guys, probably there's a greater chance of you getting into foul trouble. Look, foul trouble is really random to predict. I'm not here to say that, but there's a chance where he can fall in foul trouble. But the price tag, still, I think more ways for him to succeed than fail, just because of that price tag. That's how it plays out to me.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. Just a guy that Adam and I talked about a very little, or I should say Adam talked about him, and I listened and nodded politely. But Drew Eubanks, potentially, 17.8 minute projection, but potentially in a situation where if he picks up a few additional minutes based on, per minute and at that price, maybe a little bit of value in the cheap range at power forward and center. FanDuel slate at 3,900, power forward only for, center only for 3.4K on the DK slate, but would need to find himself some minutes to get there. Tournament only consideration. You mentioned Markkanen on the opposite side of this one for Utah, who I've been getting to a ton so far this year, has paid me off already several times. Kelly Olynyk, similar story. Been getting him as a value center play on FanDuel. He's got power forward eligibility over there as well. So decent amount of upside. He's not grading out great, but it's also, he's not all that popular today. So I'm happy to go there in tournaments. Any of these 5-ish percent optimal, but also 5-ish percent owned guys, I'm always happy to grab there. We're seeing Vanderbilt grading out well. We're obviously seeing Jordan Clarkson up toward the top of the board with a continued no Mike Conley here. What do you like from the Utah side of things?
Yeah, it's Markkanen. Markkanen looks awesome. Clarkson's expensive, man. 7,600 on DraftKings is expensive, but he looks pretty cheap at $6,200 on FanDuel. Huge price difference there. Side-by-side play for Jordan Clarkson there. 25 on Yahoo looks fine to take your chances on. It's really been Markkanen, Clarkson, and Olynyk for me. I know Sexton has showed up in some lineups for me of late, and he just hasn't been good. He's burned a lot of good lineups that I've had just with Utah being later in the night. He just hasn't been able to pay off. And that's really about it. It's kind of their mini big three there. They were winning a bunch of games up until Conley got hurt. Last night, we did see Walker Kessler play some Jared Vanderbilt, take away some minutes from Jared Vanderbilt. Walker Kessler is an intriguing fantasy producer. If you want to take some flowers on Walker Kessler, that's completely fine. But Malik Beasley, a guy who gets hot off the bench, 3-point shooter, really about it. It's Markkanen, Clarkson, and Olynyk for me. And it's really only Clarkson on FanDuel. I can't go to 7,600 Clarkson in confidence. I know it's a Portland spot, but it's expensive for Clarkson. I'm getting a little bit of sticker shock there.
Yeah, you're definitely seeing him knocked down significantly on that DK slate, despite the multi-position between point guard and shooting guard. 7,600 just has him coming up only 10% optimal, 12% boom score probability against a similar kind of ownership. So he's negatively leveraged at not great probability numbers. Totally different story on FanDuel. Still slightly negatively leveraged, but excellent probability marks across the board. Only 6,200 with multi-position across both guard spots. So definitely somebody I'll be interested in on the FanDuel slate. I'll have a bunch of Markkanen. Vanderbilt's interesting because, and Adam talked about this morning as well, and it dovetails with the Walker Kessler part of the conversation. If he's not going to be out there closing this game, and if he's only getting 24, the upside is probably capped. Good as he can be sometimes, there's probably not a ton of ceiling on him where he might provide that window of opportunity for Kessler. If Kessler jumps from the 18 minutes that he's got projected for tonight to something like the 25 he played last night, in 25 minutes last night, he put up 39.7 FanDuel points. That's pretty dramatic. dramatic for a guy who only costs 4,000, but he's a center only on the FanDuel slate, which jams him up a little bit in my mind. At 3,200 on DK, where you can get him center or util, I think there's a little bit more utility in that. So what would you do with Kessler? Like how much would you go to him? It's a tournament dart throw kind of a play. Would you go to him on the FanDuel slate where he's center only?
I'm going to take some chances on a 4-game slate. Look, we haven't touched on many spend down centers outside of Wagner.
Yeah.
And how many times out of 100, if you were to play this slate, does Walker Kessler outscore Mo Wagner? I'll say like 5 to 7. I don't know what your Sims say, Terry, but I'm just doing that off the top of my head just because Kessler's intriguing. He was like not a throw-in piece in the Gobert trade. I do think Utah wanted to grab him just because of the potential he has. I forget if it was a first-round pick, but Kessler has an upside, and we don't have many spend down center options. So, and he's cheap, and the cheaper guys can't really burn your lineup as much as an expensive guy just because of how the math grades out. So, opportunity cost at center is kind of high because of there's Gobert, there's Şengün, there's Bobo. I mean, obviously those guys project much more higher than Kessler, but there's no stud centers on the slate. I mean, there's Nurkic.
Yeah, it's not a Jokic kind of a night.
Yeah, there's no Jokic, no Embiid. And on a 4-game slate you got to take some chances and high risk, high reward with Kessler's there. But it's not going to take much for you to get above the field on him. So I like getting above the field on Kessler.
Yeah, and I think it is one of those interesting tournament spots where, people need to get their minds around the idea of like, look, we're probably going to be wrong. Like you said, maybe 5 times out of 100, if you run this, does he even outscore Franz Wagner, let alone all the other center options? But those few times out of several thousand runs, those few times where he does get there at that price, that's going to give you such an extreme upside on the field because he's 3% owned on DK. He's 1% owned on FanDuel. So if you're making that play for 4,000 at center on FanDuel, spending up to a couple, combinations of other guards or whatever that other people aren't getting to, you're just going to be leveraged up so much over the field that you win so much more significantly when it does hit. You don't need it to hit all that frequently. So we're not saying, hey, this is the play of the day, jam them into all your lineups. We're saying, hey, total dart throw. But when it does come in, you're going to be thanking us because it's going to do a lot for your lineups. So I think it's important to understand the nature of that kind of a play as we look at it here. But yeah, it's definitely at least a little bit interesting. I'll see how to work them in maybe a couple. I'll probably have to do that manually. I think just grab a few shares of them in my sort here. Anything else to round us out from this one that you want to call out? Basically running up against the end of the show here.
No, that's really about it. It should be an intriguing slate just because there aren't that many super studs. There's Curry and SGA, but not like the usual. Like last night, we had so many studs to pick and choose from. It's going to be a weird stars and scrub build. We'll see if balance comes out on top. It's going to be a fun night at DFS for sure.
Yeah, I've looked at a lot of exposures, but not a lot of lineups specifically to see, how balanced they are versus how starsy scrubsy they are. I expect to get a decent amount of balance in here, and maybe leaving a few bucks on the table might be a bit of a differentiator tonight. A lot of different ways to play this one on a 4-game slate. So definitely intriguing without those huge stars to chase. Should be a fun one. With that, gang, stick around. We've got Live Before Lock coming up after this, just momentarily on the same channel. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, all that good stuff. Ryan, great job, man. Anything to tell the people, plug, tell them where to find you, any of that good stuff?
No, just I'm Rayen Patnaik on Twitter, and fun show, Terry. It's been a minute since we did one together.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
And good luck to everyone. Hopefully one of you guys have a great night tonight, or many of you guys have a great night tonight in chat. Thanks for joining us.
There you go. Thanks a lot, gang. Good luck.
What is happening, everybody? It is Saturday night, time for another Stokastic NBA Live Before Lock, and for this weekend, a 4-game slate. We're kind of getting gypped on some of these Saturdays. Have you noticed this, Matt? You and I, we get together once a week to talk about these slates, and for whatever reason, Saturdays, they're not giving us an ample amount of games to talk about. We demand more games. How do we get on the phone with Adam Silver?
Well, we had a decent amount of games today. We just only put 4 of them on the main slate.
Well, I mean, there was only 6 games in total, right? There were 7.
There was the one
2 other ones.
Random matinee.
One of them going poorly for me right now, as could be expected. I have a bet on the Charlotte Hornets against Milwaukee Bucks today because the Bucks resting all of their players. So you think for sure Hornets at home, plus 9.5 points. Surely that's a great spot. Apparently not the case. They can't beat like Sandro Mamalishvili and who else is in the rotation today for the Brook Lopez is playing normal minutes. He has 3 points and they're just getting beaten up by like AJ Green, who is apparently not just a wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. So hopefully the Hornets could at least cover the spread. But as you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. For the next hour and 26 minutes, Matt, LaMarca, and I were going to be breaking down the NBA today. We're going to be talking about FanDuel. We're going to be talking about DraftKings, and we're going to be answering all of your questions. If anybody's in Discord and has questions for us, at me, we will be answering them. Before we get in, Matt, do you have any just general overarching views or thoughts about this slate? And if you don't, that is totally okay.
It's an interesting one. I think there's a couple of like chalky value spots. We'll talk about Kyle Anderson for sure. I'm sure he's going to be a big focus tonight. Same with Trendon Watford for Portland. But I think there are some interesting pivots. Well, one interesting pivot in particular off of those guys. So that's kind of where I'm making a little bit of a stand. I don't think that either of those players are, bad chalk or anything like that. But there's one guy in particular that I think just has a little bit more upside and should command lower ownership.
By the way, GQ in the chat is saying, why would you ever bet on the Hornets? Because they were massive underdogs at home and the Bucks ruled out every single player on the roster. That's the type of, but that's regardless of how it ends up going today, if they cover the big spread or not, this is the spot that you bet every single time. If you know in advance that the Bucks are not going to be playing their normal guys and the game is priced as if all those guys are going to be in, like that's how you find value. It would be the equivalent of saying like, oh, all of the Spurs starters are out today. Why would you play, I don't know, like dipshit McFucknuts or whoever the third string center is for the Spurs? Like those are just the value guys you play in DFS. It's the same scenario for betting.
100%.
Yeah. And then also people in chat like Fantasy Basement saying, I wasn't confident that Bobby Portis was going to get real minutes. Same with me. I didn't think that Portis was going to get real minutes necessarily, nor Brook Lopez. Lopez didn't play over 30 minutes once all of last year in the regular season, not once. And now, I mean, Brook Lopez has been incredible this year. Playing full minutes on the tail end of a back-to-back, I just don't really weird to me. So clearly I'm tilted here. I just cover the spread, Hornets. This is the easiest spot ever. Just win. You don't have to win, but cover the spread for sure. All right, we've got today's slate to talk about as well. And not really injury news right now. Literally everybody who's listed as questionable, like everybody who is in, everybody who's out is out. There's nothing really crazy unexpected on the injury report. One piece of news that we did get just before we started that I want to run by you to see if it means anything to you. The Toronto Raptors starting lineup came out. We do have Christian Koloko back starting at center for them. Does that mean anything to you?
Not really. We have enough value on this slate that I don't think you necessarily need to go into the Koloko, range of outcomes, right? Like the floor is low. The ceiling is not very high. We can do better.
That's how I feel as well. So we've seen Koloko. He started last game. He played 22 minutes. He's actually started a handful of games, and he has now started 10 games overall for the year, 21 minutes per game. Those starts 14 fantasy points. Now, the reason I bring him up, even though I don't have interest and you don't appear to either, is I figured it was something that we're probably going to get asked about. And I also just want to make sure we're covering the bases. It's something that it's a 4-game slate. It's a smaller one. Somebody who could have potentially been somebody of interest for value. And I know earlier in the year when he first moved into the starting lineup, I thought maybe Christian Koloko could be interesting. Then we saw him make a few starts. Ends up, no. He is not an interesting man as a starter. So The other injury situations that kind of shape the slate, and nothing that's particularly new, but Eric Gordon is out. Klay Thompson is out. It appears he's not going to be playing in back-to-backs this year. And of course, Karl Anthony Towns out from Minnesota. Not the first game that he's been out, but for me, when I'm running my lineups and based on what a lot of the ownership shows, it seems a lot of people are getting to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So that to me is the most important situation on the slate that I want to highlight. First, the absence of Karl Anthony Towns. Do you agree with the chalk that's on the Timberwolves?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's safe chalk. The one I will push back a little bit on Jalen Noel. Noel has been so good this year on a per minute basis. The guy has been really filling it up, and he got to 30 minutes in their last game. But they're going to be getting McClanahan, whoever he is, their other point guard. Why am I blanking on his name all of a
Jordan
sudden?
McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you. Jordan McLaughlin. He will be back in the lineup tonight. He's missed 5 games in a row. He's going to play. He's been in the rotation when he's been active. So I don't know if I'm necessarily expecting another, 30 plus minutes for Noel tonight. I think he returns more to like the low to mid 20s, and he's still more than capable of paying off this salary with that much playing time. He's just not as appealing of a play to me.
So I don't think McLaughlin, and I'm going to agree and disagree with you. First, I'm still playing a lot of Noel. I think he's one of the better value plays on the slate. I agree with you. McLaughlin could cut into his, well, I'm not going to say, I think McLaughlin's going to play. I don't think he's cutting into Jalen Noel's minutes. I think he's cutting into the minutes of like Austin Rivers. To me, Noel's played so well. It's hard to justify them being like, hey, Jordan McLaughlin's back. We're going to cut Noel's minutes. I think they're going to look at other guys and it's going to be like, hey, Bryn Forbes, he's played here and there, cutting his minutes. Austin Rivers, he's actually started some games for them recently. I expect he's going to play less minutes. There's other guys those minutes could come from. I still think we're going to see minutes in the upper 20s from Noel just because it's so hard to deny him at this point. His last few games, he's been one of the better players on the team. And the minutes have escalated a little bit. So the last 4 games, 18 minutes, 24 minutes, 25 minutes, 31. The last 2 games, 24 and 23 points. I think we're looking at 28 to 32 minutes for him.
Okay, I've got the under on that, but clearly it's a guy who has upside, right? So yeah. I have no problem with him being a popular option. I just think that Kyle Anderson's probably a little bit safer, right? Because his minutes are locked in for the most part. We've seen him play big minutes in the past. He's a roughly a fantasy point per minute type of guy. He can do a little bit of everything. So I feel fine playing him. Again, he played nearly 40 minutes in their last game. I don't think he gets back to that, but if he plays 32, right, he should definitely be able to return value at his salary.
And then is there anybody, because I know you mentioned Jordan McLaughlin. The next thing I wanted to ask you is if there's any lower owned players on the Wolves that you're going to try to get into your lineups. Is McLaughlin somebody you're going to consider playing if you think he could take minutes from Noel? Because the reality is that if he has a really big game that does come to fruition, you've got yourself a hell of a leverage play.
Yeah, I don't think he plays that much. I think he's more just going to be a nuisance to the rest of those guys. I have him projected for about 15 minutes right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's enough that it does take minutes from Austin Rivers. It takes minutes from Noel. It's not really enough to make him in play on a slate where there's like plenty of value options. I think I would rather use Naz Reid if I was looking for a low owned Timberwolf to target, right? He also saw a little bit of a spike in playing time. He's a good producer per minute basis. The big downside with him is his only center eligibility. He doesn't have the dual eligibility on DraftKings, but 3,600 for him, I think, is a price that he can pay off.
All right, let's start answering some questions because we have we've got one in the Discord chat here. We've also got a super chat that just came in. So once again, if you guys haven't done yet, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Michael McKinney asking his normal question. Michael, I have to ask you, you said 5 favorite plays on FanDuel. He usually asks for cash games. He didn't clarify 4 cash games today, but I'll just answer the question then as it has been stated, which who are our 5 favorite plays for today on FanDuel. And let me pull up my FanDuel lineups that I built right now. And let's So one thing I think that we should note in terms of an injury, because one of my favorite plays on FanDuel and DraftKings for that matter is Yusuf Nurkic. Sure, Eubanks is currently questionable, and Eubanks individually doesn't make a massive difference himself. He's not someone we're considering for DFS, but if he doesn't play, Nurkic becomes somebody that we could then count on to play really big minutes without anybody to spell him, unless there's some sort of foul trouble issue. But anyway, favorite plays for me on FanDuel are Steph Curry, Yusuf Nurkic, Kyle Anderson, D'Angelo Russell, and Jordan Poole.
Okay. I had 4 of those 5 in my head.
Okay.
I also had Steph Curry. I had Yusuf Nurkic. I had Kyle Anderson. I had Jordan Poole. But for me, my guy today is Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner at 4,200 on FanDuel, and his salary on DraftKings. I love him whenever he's going to play minutes. And you would think his minutes are pretty clear today, right? He played 35 and a half minutes in his last game. And the fact that he only had 25 FanDuel points, I think is a little bit of an outlier. Like, this guy is a clear per minute stud. He had 30 in 26 the previous game. So giving him, 30 plus minutes, I think he is a smash tonight.
So I want to address, and by the way, I agree with everything that you're saying there. And somebody, just sometimes people post stuff in YouTube chat and the names stick out to me, but Dick Chuck had said SGA not a favorite play, maybe only on DK. I think SGA I don't have an issue with SGA. He's just not one of my most rostered players. There's just better points per dollar plays today.
Yep. Yeah, no, he's a fine tournament option. He's just not a cash game type play.
And somebody asked me, or not somebody asked me, but somebody said, Greg loves himself some Nurkic. Yeah, hell yeah, I do. First of all, other than last game, he kind of sucked, but he has made me a good amount of money lately. And if you look at his rates over the last couple of years with no Lillard, no McCollum on the court, he's generally been a really good fantasy producer this year. 42.45 DraftKings points per 36 minutes when you don't have Damian Lillard on the court. And now the playing time, which before was a little bit iffy, becomes less of a concern. Number one, if Eubanks doesn't play, but also they've been willing to give Nurkic more minutes in some of these spots as of late without Damian Lillard. So he gets into some early foul trouble last game and kind of had a weak performance overall, 32 minutes, finished with 25 fantasy points. But look at the games before then. 32 minutes, 43 fantasy points, 34 minutes, 42 fantasy points, 38 minutes, 43 fantasy points. Yeah, I like Nurkic. He's been really good without Damian Lillard, and I think that should probably continue. So I'm on the Nurk train, and I hope Eubanks gets rolled out so we could really see those minutes solidified again.
Love Nurkic tonight.
Yeah. Joey Barone saying I should randomly come on with a Nurk jersey one night. If he wins me a GPP, if I win $100,000 with Nurkic in a lineup, then yeah, I'll come up. Maybe not the next day. Whenever it gets delivered to me in the mail, then actually no, that's a lie. I'm not gonna show up with my pasty white self in cut off sleeves on a show. It's probably not ever gonna happen.
It's not a good look for a grown man. I got, I have friends that still try to pull it off, and I'm like, you look like a moron right now.
Yeah, and I mean, also, it's just you're wearing the name of another adult male on the back of your shirt, and he has no clue who you are. It's weird.
I'm okay with that for example, I had this out because I've been crying into it for the last few days, but I don't think there's anything wrong with owning a Mets Jacob deGrom jersey.
So, I mean, deGrom, I did actually wanted to ask you because it was something I thought about when the Rangers signed deGrom yesterday. And the first thing I thought about is what Mets fans do I know that I could troll? And I realized, Matt LaMarca, and I'm going to be on the show with him tomorrow. How did you feel about deGrom going to the Rangers? Because I've seen some, I think, fairly ludicrous takes from Mets fans online.
So he's my all-time favorite player. One thing that I've come to the realization of within the past couple of days is that one positive of the Mets being so bad for most of my lifetime is I've never really had to lose a player that I really liked. You know what I'm saying? Like, prior to deGrom, I think the biggest free agent loss the Mets have ever really had was like Jose Reyes, and he kind of stunk after he left the Mets. So I think the money for him was fair. It's probably a little bit aggressive when you consider that, he's going to be pitching into his 40s if they exercise that option. But Yeah, I wanted him back, right? When he's healthy, he's the best pitcher in baseball, and I don't think it's particularly close. And apparently the Mets solution is we're going to sign an even older pitcher, or at least we're going to try to sign an even older pitcher in Justin Verlander. So I'm upset, and I do think that it's not the end of the world, right? Like the Mets barely had DeGrom. They won 101 games this year. He won 6. So I think that they'll be fine, but it still hurts a little.
Yeah. So first of all, I immediately bet the Rangers. I have them at 60-1 to win the World Series, and then 30-1 to win the American League.
Well,
so
I think they're down. They're down to like 20-1 now, I want to say.
Yeah, I think they're
maybe 30-1, but either way, that's a good number.
They're like 10-1 to win the AL, 25-1 to win the American League, something along those lines. I haven't looked at what the most recent odds are, but I think the Rangers should be good this year. But the main thing too that I was curious to ask you is that I see Mets fans on Twitter now who are like, "Oh, too much money to pay Jacob deGrom," as if it's their money.
Yeah,
it's like, well, why are you counting Steve Cohen's money? It doesn't impact the team. It isn't like the NBA or the NFL where the NFL salary cap's fake, but it's not like because you sign them, you don't have the salary cap space to sign somebody else. It just is your owner willing to spend more money than another rich owner. And Steve Cohen was not in this scenario.
Yeah, apparently that was the other big thing was he did not go back to the Mets to let them make like a final offer. So I think he just wanted to go to Texas. No state taxes. The media is a little bit less invasive. He just seems like that kind of guy that, I don't know, he might get into like cattle or something. He's a little bit of a weird dude. Yeah, Tyler approves.
Hey, cattle is a hell of a tax write-off, fellas. I can learn y'all something about that one day if y'all are interested.
All right, we're getting too far off track now. The other injury news that I want to talk about, it's not so much injury news, but Klay Thompson resting today. He's not going to be playing in back-to-backs. I love Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole is going to start today. We've seen Jordan Poole make a handful of starts this year. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's crushed in every single start that he's made. Let me pull up Jordan Poole's stats this year. And by the way, also, could not have a better matchup today than against the Houston Rockets. The Rockets, tail end of back-to-back for Houston. They play at a fast pace. They play no defense. The overall numbers for Jordan Poole this year, he has made 4 starts. In those starts, 33 minutes per game, 31% usage rate, averaging 40.5 fantasy points. Hard to get away from Jordan Poole, another guy who's underpriced considering the scenario. Jordan Poole, another core play for me.
Yep, for sure. He's just too cheap when Klay sits. We've kind of seen that. And I think the DFS sites need to kind of be a little bit more aggressive pricing him up now on the second leg of back-to-backs because it's almost kind of becoming a free square type situation. But I heard Rinpack was discussing Poole versus Wiggins on the previous show. And for me, that's an easy Jordan Poole call. Like when you look at the on-off data, Andrew Wiggins is going to do Andrew Wiggins things kind of regardless whoever's on the floor with him. Jordan Poole is the guy who really sees the benefit from a usage perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the usage for him, but it's way more minutes as well.
Yeah.
Right. Because Jordan Poole typically comes off the bench. And by the way, he's really, really struggled with his shot this year. He's been extremely inconsistent, but it doesn't stop him from shooting. He's a 27.2% usage rate, but he goes from playing 27 minutes per game, or actually less. So as a reserve this year, he plays 26 minutes per game. As a starter, 33 minutes. Those extra 7 minutes when you're a guy who averages about a fantasy point per minute, it's another 7 fantasy points. That makes a massive deal when you're projecting somebody. So it's twofold. Like you said, number one, more usage without Klay, but then of course the extra minutes. So overall, just to reiterate those numbers, 33 minutes per game as a starter for Jordan Poole this year, averaging 40.5 fantasy points. Play him in cash games. I'm also going to be playing a lot of him in tournaments. Do you have any issue with the ownership going to him?
No, we haven't projected for 34% ownership on DraftKings, and he still has a positive leverage score. So I have him in closer to like 50% of my lineups at the moment. I think even more than that is probably acceptable.
Got a super chat here and then some more questions in the Discord. So we will answer those next. This from Gabe Games. Hey guys, thanks for all your help. Mo Wagner from Orlando or KJ Martin from Houston for last piece on FanDuel. I prefer Wagner.
For me, it's going to be Wagner over just about everybody tonight.
Reasonable, particularly on FanDuel. So he's somebody who's very, very different looking on FanDuel compared to, well, I shouldn't say like wildly different looking, but $4,700 on DraftKings is a very good price tag, but $4,200 on FanDuel, that $500 discount, especially considering that FanDuel has some other players from Minnesota, for instance, priced up a little more than they are on DK. Like, Wagner, I find to be fairly hard to get away from on FanDuel.
100, yeah, absolutely. He's cheaper than Kyle Anderson on FanDuel, but he's more expensive on DraftKings. So I still prefer Wagner regardless, but the FanDuel price is just extremely juicy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's hit on some of these questions in the Discord chat. This one from ModDubT. Yo, love the content. Love you. Thank you. Appreciate the support. I have a question. Last guy in for me in a DK utility single entry, Cole Anthony, Jabari Smith, or Colin Sexton, or anyone else under 5,800 peak year interest. All right, so let me look at my projections and see who I have projected the best for 5,800. And that is a 5,800 or less. Well, so that's very clearly Jordan Poole. But I think there's a good chance you already have Jordan Poole in your life. If you don't have Jordan Poole, the answer is Jordan Poole. But if it's somebody else, the player I have next would be, so this is actually kind of tough because I don't have the guys I have projected best. Like I have Kyle Anderson projected for more fantasy points than Colin Sexton. So the answer to me is Kyle Anderson next. But then it also depends. Do you already have Kyle Anderson in your lineup? It's very possible. If we're talking about somebody's price of right around 5,800, then the answer to me is Sexton.
Yeah, of those three players, I agree. I also agree that I have Anderson and Wagner as like the next best guys after Poole when you're talking about this price range. But Justice Winslow is also in the conversation for me, and he's 5,200. So I think that if you're looking for somebody closer to 5,800, Winslow would be my choice.
Yeah, I don't mind that either. We've got, oh boy, here comes Seth. Here he comes with his questions. Crazy night watching a Law and Order marathon with my wife and her boyfriend. They were wondering if it's okay to play Jeremy Grant and Nurkic in the same lineup. Overall, I don't have an issue with that. I just didn't play a lot of Jeremy Grant. I love Nurkic today. I think a lot of people know that. Nurkic is my second most rostered player right now behind Jordan Poole. So I don't have an issue with Grant and Nurkic being together. I just didn't play a whole lot of Jeremy Grant. I
have a lot of both. I think Jeremy Grant's a very strong play tonight. He was the poster boy of the article that I wrote up this morning. Usage rate of at least 30.4% now in 4 straight games. He's playing close to 40 minutes a night. And, you know, now we're taking Josh Hart out of the equation. Against a Utah team that hasn't stopped anybody in the past, month or so. I think that Portland in general is a good team to target. And yeah, I have no problem playing Grant and Nurkic together.
Yeah. And once again, I don't have an issue with them being in the same lineup. I assume that the lineups I do have Grant in, a lot of them are going to have Nurkic. But it's just not somebody I'm playing a whole lot of in Jeremy Grant. Some of the other questions that we have that just came in through the Discord. This one is from Steven Leibowitz. Steven wants to know, do you find gentlemen think it is viable to be a little more balanced and fade SGA and Curry? And boy, don't we wish LeBron James was playing tonight. Kind of indifferent if LeBron was playing tonight or not. As for fading SGA and Curry, I find them very difficult to get away from on FanDuel. DraftKings, it's easier to make lineups that don't have either of them. FanDuel, I kind of think looking at the lineups I have, almost all of them have one or the other. DraftKings, definitely viable to go balanced.
It's viable, but it's tougher. I just ran a quick build and I took those two guys out of the player pool, and like the optimizer is still trying to feed me Pascal Siakam. So if I take him out, you're losing some of the strong value plays, right? You're losing the guys like Kyle Anderson, like Noel, and like Mo Wagner if you go super balanced. So I think that paying up for Curry particularly is the best play here.
Yeah, so, by the way, I do have more exposure to Siakam than I do to SGA or Curry today. A lot of this due because of the position eligibility, where DraftKings, Curry, and SGA are only point guard eligible, whereas Siakam getting a power forward and center. So there's so many more spots you could play him in because you get him in the forward spot, center spot, utility spot, forward spot also. Whereas Curry and SGA, you can only play them in the 3 spots each. I also like that he's cheaper, and I have Siakam and SGA projected nearly identically. Siakam has been a monster this year when he's been healthy. There's no more minutes restriction for him. I know that some people might look at last game and think that he does because he only played 32 minutes against the Nets. But number one, that game was fairly one-sided. And then point two, also, he got into very early foul trouble. But actually, Siakam is my favorite pay-up option on the slate for DraftKings. For FanDuel, it's Curry.
Okay. I mean, I don't hate that take. He's definitely not going to carry a ton of ownership. He has a slightly positive leverage in the boom bust tool. For me, the positionality with him is a little bit tough tonight because I feel like most of the plays that I like are in the front court. So it becomes easier to just plug in Curry, plug in SGA, plug in, Kevin Porter Jr., somebody that I really like tonight. You've got the Anthony Edwards or D'Angelo Russell for the Timberwolves. Like, I just think it's easier to pay up at guard, but you're not wrong. Like, Pascal Siakam has been incredible this year. And if he does get back to his, 36 to 38 minute workload, he has the potential to erupt.
Which I assume he's going to, unless this game's a blowout, which is possible because they're playing against the Orlando Magic. And we've got the Raptors as the biggest favorites on the slate, tied with the Golden State Warriors. But if you look at the minutes for Siakam, it was 32 last game, 34 the game before, and then 30 in his first game back from injury. Like, there's been nothing that's, I guess maybe 30 in the first game is a little bit restrictive, but Nick Nurse does not give a shit about working his guys into the ground. I think Siakam is going to play a pretty healthy amount of minutes today. By the way, Stephen Leibowitz followed up. He only wanted to bring up LeBron James because he wanted to hear you say LeBron James.
LeBron James.
There we go. Now he's happy. Now he's been completed. The next question we have from JEW is Gobert a good play today for DK GPPs, or does he just stink now? So, it's funny because I've been trying to figure out because most people hate Rudy Gobert, right?
It's great. I've been asking myself the same question all day, to be honest with you.
And there's been numerous issues this year with the Timberwolves. Obviously, the issue with Karl-Anthony Towns being out right now is a massive one for this team. But if you look at some of the advanced stats, the reality of a lot of this team's issues, it's twofold. Number one, players who normally make threes are simply not making threes for this team. That's just bad variance, right? The fact that almost every single player on the team, Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, like all these guys shooting career worst 3-point percentages this year, that's not ideal for them. The other thing too, I like going to dunks and threes. Rudy Gobert this year is 69th percentile in defensive rating and 68th overall. This is a guy who's generally been a darling of advanced stats and is always rated as one of the top 3 to 5 defensive players year after year in the league. And then overall, his offensive numbers have been more impactful than I think people would generally want to give him credit for because he's not flashy or anything like that. But the reality is, if you're a big man who's a really good finisher around the rim, that has some value and utility, and he's a good offensive rebounder. He's not been good this year. And this is like not in terms of me saying anything about what he does for the floor spacing minister. Like overall, he's not been good relative to expectations. He's been a very average NBA player, which is an issue for Minnesota. Now, with that said, I have to think going forward, and his numbers this year, I'm taking a leap of faith because his numbers this year when Karl-Anthony Towns have been off the court have not been good for Gobert. I just logically have to look at him and assume in a matchup, number one, which is a good one against OKC, but then also looking at the starting lineup for the Timberwolves, I think the rebound numbers are going to be massive for Rudy Gobert going forward, even if the numbers for him this year with Karl-Anthony Towns off the court don't indicate that's been the case. I think it's a small sample size fluke. I think Gobert is going to be fine from a fantasy standpoint going forward. I'm starting a little bit concerned in real life that he might be on the decline. For DFS, I'm playing him tonight. What are you going to be doing with Gobert?
I have some. I imagine I'll be underweight. I just prefer Nurkic for slightly less. I think he's got a little bit more upside because he is capable of, scoring the ball, distributing the ball, things that we really don't associate with Rudy Gobert. As for like the real life fit, I always thought it was a mistake to try to play him with Karl-Anthony Towns, right? Like taking Karl Anthony Towns and playing him at power forward just kind of takes away everything that is special about Karl Anthony Towns, which was he was a matchup nightmare for other centers. So I didn't like the fit to begin with. I will say in their first game without Towns, they held Memphis to 101 points. So maybe the defense will be better now that, they're playing a more traditional type lineup. So that's something to monitor. We'll see. I think Gobert's fine at this price tag, but he doesn't excite me.
So he's in terms of my favorite Timberwolves players, right? So he makes it into my lineups, but I like Jalen Noel more, I like Kyle Anderson more. Actually, he's the player I'm getting the third most exposure to from the team right now. But I do think still though that if you're trying to prioritize Timberwolves players, here's where I have them in order of exposure for me. It is Noah 1, Kyle Anderson 2, Rudy Gobert 3, D'Angelo Russell 4, Anthony Edwards 5. What is it for you, your favorite Timberwolves, if you're just reading them off in terms of the exposure you have to them?
Slow-Mo 1, Noel 2, Russell 3, Gobert 4, Anthony Edwards 5.
Yeah, by the way, we just got the starting lineup for the Timberwolves. It is Russell, Moore, Edwards, McDaniels, and Gobert. By the way, because people are bringing up Moore started last game as well. So if we look at the minutes for the Timberwolves in their last game, here's what it was. It was, pull up the box score. It was Edwards started and played 40 minutes. Russell started and played 38 minutes. Kyle Anderson started and played 39 minutes. Rudy Gobert started, played 26 minutes. He got into foul trouble. Wendell Moore started. He played 20 minutes. I don't think Moore is going to play a massive role, but I am going to have to do some recalibrating because I wasn't expecting McDaniels to be starting over Kyle Anderson today.
Yeah, that's not great. I kind of come back to, I just think we should temper our expectations with Noel a little bit. If Moore is going to start, that's another guy that is probably going to play around 20 minutes. Right. And we have to give McLaughlin some numbers from somewhere. So, I'm not expecting Noel to all of a sudden tank, but I would be surprised if he got back to 30 minutes again tonight.
So let's talk about some of these other pieces now. Jaden McDaniels starting, Wendell Moore starting. Like I said, Wendell Moore started last game. He didn't play that much. I don't think that there's opportunity for him to just come in and destroy the slate. So Wendell Moore, I don't really have that much interest in. But what does this do for you with Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson? Because I was expecting Anderson to start over McDaniels.
Yeah, I think it definitely hurts Kyle Anderson, right? I mean, the biggest case that he had going for him was volume. He's not a bad per minute guy, but his per minute numbers have come down a little bit this year compared to what we saw from him in Memphis. He's at 0.85 DraftKings points per minute this season. And I think it makes McDaniels interesting, right? He's only $300 more. He's roughly an equivalent per minute type of dude. I think that it might make sense to balance your exposure a little bit between the two, because I had no Jaden McDaniels. The fact that he's starting now, that's something I'll change.
So I just changed some minutes around. I ended up with McDaniels for about 24.5 fantasy points as a projection and Kyle Anderson at 25.5. So to be clear, this doesn't make Kyle Anderson unplayable. I still think it makes him a pretty good points per dollar play, but it definitely changes the amount of exposure I get to him. And when I rerun the lineups, I assume I'm going to be underweight to him now, depending on what his ownership ends up being. Now, if his ownership tanks as a result of this, because he was projected for nearly 40% ownership, then that's different. I'm not going to have that 40% number, though.
Yeah, my big thing was I have to find the minutes to give Wendell Moore. And because it wouldn't have shocked me if he fell out of the rotation tonight. So I have to determine how many minutes I'm giving him. And that's not going to be a fun process, because as a starter, you would think his floor is 18 minutes, something like that, right? If he starts the first half and the third quarter and he plays, 8 minutes each and then never comes back in, that's probably like the bare bones scenario of what you'll see.
He played 20 minutes last game. I think that's a reasonable expectation. 20 minutes again.
Yeah.
That's what he played as a starter last game.
I want him. Can we just call up? We should just tell him not, let's stop trying to ruin Kyle Anderson night.
Well, it's based. I got my lineups running right now, and yeah, definitely getting to. It looks like a little bit less Kyle Anderson now, and I'm curious to see where his ownership ends up being now. Because before we had Kyle Anderson projected for 46% ownership on DraftKings, 38% on FanDuel, and those numbers should come down now. So see what happens. 22 minutes until the slate locks. Let's hit on some of the questions that we've got in the Discord channel, and we have this one from Bloopy. What is your typical players used looking like on Fantasy Cruncher? What is a good expected players used on 150 lineups tonight? It depends how, like, it's hard for me to say. I don't have like a goal for how many players I'm going to use. It's a lot of times it's going to depend how strong are the value plays, because if the value plays are really strong, there's a good chance I might have one individual player and, like 80 to 90% of my lineups. Last night, DeJounte Murray ended up being, I think, in 95% of my lineups. So when you get certain scenarios like that and your lineups are really going to be gravitating towards one or two players, it's going to make a difference in the amount of total players used. I don't really have a good answer because it's not something I really think about. I just kind of build my lineups, and it's who are the best plays of the day relative to my projections, ownership projections. It's not really like, oh no, I only have 30 players in my player pool, I need 33. It's not really how I think about it. Do you have any kind of a different answer to that, Matt?
No, I feel pretty similarly. The one thing I will say is that I think the more common mistake is having too many players in your player pool versus not having enough players in your player pool. Like, I think if you're playing to try and cover all your bases, you're just going to end up losing a lot. When I'm right, I want to make sure that I have the right combination of players. So I try to go with a tighter player pool than I think maybe some other people do. But, I like to take stands. And again, when I nail the things that I'm taking stands on, I want to be rewarded.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. Particularly, 150 lineups is different than I assume a lot of the people watching are playing one lineup. You have the same amount of players as everybody else. But if you have, if you're playing, let's say 3 lineups, like I wouldn't look at it and say like, oh, I can't play this guy in all 3 lineups. Like especially if you're somebody who just hand builds and plays a couple lineups, get as much exposure as you can to the guys you think are the best value plays. Don't build an additional lineup just to get exposure to players you don't like, if that follows.
Yeah.
The next question that we have in here, it is from Jordan Loist. He's saying for DK Cash, it is a 3v3 Curry, Siakam, Watford, or Russell, Edwards, and Simons. I prefer the Curry, Siakam, and Watford combination.
Yes, I agree. I like all 6 of those players for the most part, but I would say the first one has a little bit more upside.
The next question is from Juju Rage. He wants to know who is my highest owned player on FanDuel. I have to rerun FanDuel lineups, but I assume Jordan Poole is going to be the answer.
And for me, it will be Mo Wagner.
Okay. Mo Wagner. I have no problem with that either. To me, it's either Mo Wagner or Jordan Poole when lineups get rerun for me for FanDuel. I'm uploading my DraftKings lineups right now because I assume we're not going to be getting any more information that comes in the next 18 minutes that's going to really change anything. So download the CSV and bring that up. We just got the starting lineup for OKC. It is SGA, Dort, Giddey, Pokashevsky, Jeremiah Robinson. That's the starters for the first half. Who OKC is going to start in the second half, that's anybody's guess. Nobody knows that. That's always a mystery. Why? There's no other team that does that. What is the point of playing different starters in the second half compared to the first half every single game?
Got to keep them on their toes, Greg. I don't know.
The dumbest thing. And he did it in the preseason too, and he got mad when he wasn't allowed to do it. He said he was losing competitive edge in preseason. The team isn't even trying to win games. Not even trying to win games. How are you doing on your lineups?
I'm good, man. I'm ready to go.
See if we have any more questions that came into the Discord, which we didn't. Let's just try to go position by position now that the dust is settled and just talk about who the players we have the most exposure to. So at point guard for you, Matt, who are the priority plays?
So at point guard for me, Jordan Poole is pretty clearly number one. Steph Curry is a priority. Anthony Simons is a priority. Kevin Porter Jr. is a priority. And D'Angelo Russell. So I'm pretty much either paying up or I'm taking the value with Jordan Poole and Jalen Noel. I didn't mention him, but Jalen Noel I still have plenty of, despite me kind of being a little bit lukewarm on him.
Yeah, I think we're pretty similar because my most rostered point guards for DK, it is Russell, Simons, Noel, and Poole. Anything way for FanDuel for me, I should also add into the mix that Clarkson's a better play on FanDuel. Curry also is a much better play, in my opinion, on FanDuel. It's just the pricing overall is a little bit softer, and he's 10.5 as opposed to 10.9. So I found Curry a lot easier to get to on FanDuel. Any other players that are point guard eligible on FanDuel you view as being different looking plays than DK?
Not really. I haven't really had a chance. I want to stand a little bit for Kevin Porter Jr. in this spot. A lot of nights we struggle to break ties, I think, between Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. But the fact that Eric Gordon is out, I think, is a much bigger benefit to KPJ. With Gordon off the floor this season, Jalen Green does lead the team in usage. He's at 30.6%, but Porter is right behind at 28.2%. And we know that when it comes to the peripheral stuff, KPJ is the guy for the Rockets backcourt. He leads the team in assist rate with Gordon off the floor. So, I think finding the extra salary to get from Green to KPJ makes a lot of sense tonight. On FanDuel, there's a pretty wide gulf between the two players, right? Green is 6,500, KPJ is 7,900, but on DraftKings, they're not separated by nearly as much. I don't think that KPJ will be as popular as Green. So he's one of my guys today for tournaments. I think he's got more upside than the field is going to give him credit for.
And by the way, to circle back on something from before, Drew Eubanks is out. Josh Hart now questionable tonight for the Trailblazers. So Hart earlier was considered doubtful to play. Now he's been upgraded to questionable. I do want to bring in, because talking about Kevin Porter Jr., a betting angle, and then we'll talk about the Trailblazers. So I have a bet that I like quite a bit as a prop for tonight. It is over 4.5 rebounds for Kevin Porter Jr. Earlier when I bet, I thought there was a chance the Warriors were going to be resting players. We know now that is not the case, but still, for a guy who's averaging 6 rebounds per game, is in a high-paced game, and you're also taking Eric Gordon off the court, I think it's a good rebounding situation for Kevin Porter Jr. It's a number that's available at BetMGM. And if you guys haven't signed up at BetMGM yet, you're running out of time to take advantage of the $200 free offer that they're giving away over at BetMGM. Because you sign up at BetMGM, you click on the link below or the link that Tyler's about to throw into the YouTube chat, you are going to get $200 for free from BetMGM. All you have to do is place a $10 money line bet on any World Cup soccer game. Doesn't matter if your team wins. Doesn't matter if your team loses. It's going to pay out $200. So take advantage of that offer if you've not already signed up at BetMGM. But what do you make of over 4.5 boards for Kevin Porter Jr., Matt?
Yeah, seems low. Like you said, he's averaging around 6. He's gotten at least 5 in, it looks like, 5 of his last 7 games. I don't know if the Gordon thing, that honestly might hurt him on the glass if we're being, completely whoever gets those minutes for Eric Gordon is probably a better rebounder than Eric Gordon is at this point. So that would be my one concern, but overall, and the blowout, obviously, I guess is another possible concern, but it seems like a really strong number.
So let's talk about the Portland Trailblazers then, and the fact that that Josh Hart is now questionable to play today. First of all, bigger for me personally, Drew Eubanks being out. I already like Yusuf Nurkic, just still really do like Nurkic a lot. But if Hart ends up playing, which I'm going to assume he plays, just the fact that he was upgraded to questionable. Number one, does that make him viable? And does that take away from other players on the Blazers?
So right now I have the Blazers basically playing a 7-man rotation. And all of their starters I have projected for a ton of minutes. So Josh Hart coming back, would impact that, right? Because he would take a few minutes away from everybody. And I do think that, you know, their rotation would just be a little bit deeper, but this might be a situation where they dress him and don't play him even potentially, right? Like they're pretty thin. So I still think even if he plays, they're a team that we can get some exposure to. You might not want to lean on Trendon Watford as a value play if Hart is active, but like it would not impact my feelings about Nurkic, about Grant, about Winslow, about Anthony Simons, even about Shaden Sharp. You know, I think Shaden Sharp is an interesting value play tonight at 3,500 on DraftKings.
I don't really like any of the value guys on Portland anymore, at least in terms of really cheap guys, right? So like Sharp, I'm not going to end up playing him, not going to end up playing Watford if Hart ends up playing, because I think that's where these minutes end up coming from. And then I don't think anybody's going to play Josh Hart today. I think Hart is a really good tournament play. Now, if we find out that he's some kind of really restrictive minutes limit, I would feel differently. But assuming that he plays full minutes or close to full minutes, I think that's somebody who's going to be under-owned in tournaments. If we look at the current ownership projection on him in the numbers that just came in, we have Josh Hart.
He probably doesn't even have an ownership projection.
Yeah, he doesn't even have
somebody that
one.
was doubtful all day.
Yeah, he's not going to be popular. I think that's somebody who's potentially a really good contrarian play. Think of it this way. If we knew that Josh Hart was in all day and Damian Lillard had just been ruled out, I think Hart would have been a really popular play.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know about really popular. Like he's not a scorer. He's got like the lowest usage rate on the team amongst the regular players. He's out there to grab rebounds, to play defense. So I don't think that, you know, like Lillard, he's not somebody that I expect to see a bump in usage. And he hasn't while Lillard has been sidelined. So I'm fine with him being a contrarian tournament play at 6,300, just because we know that like he has double doubles in his range of outcomes. But I don't know if I think he would necessarily be the chalk in that scenario.
Yeah. So curious to see what ends up happening with Josh Hart. We'll be getting an update on him, I guess. Actually, maybe not even before the time we're done. So don't forget the slate locks in 10 minutes, but Matt and I are going to be sticking around for 30 minutes afterwards. And that could be a big piece of news that we end up coming is Josh Hart. Is he playing? Is he not playing? Because it seems like there is a chance that he ends up being active now. But if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Anything else that we should talk about as far as Josh Hart goes? Does he impact Anthony Simons at all? Would he impact Justice Winslow? Would any of those guys change for you at all?
No, I still like all those guys. I think Watford's the big loser, right? He goes back to the bench more than likely. You know, maybe Winslow loses a little bit in the peripheral department, but again, Josh Hart is a guy with like a 12% usage rate this year. So I don't think that his coming back in is really going to impact the offensive outlook for most of these dudes.
So putting Josh Hart back in for me, this is what it changed the most. I got to a lot more of KJ Martin Jr. just because there ends up being a void to fill for some of those cheap forwards. And also I get to a little bit more Kyle Anderson, but not nearly as much Kyle Anderson as I had before. Martin just ends up popping up more because there's just a void in terms of forward value that kind of gets filled by him. And it's also harder for me to spend all the way up to guys like Steph Curry also, if I'm not getting to Watford as much. If I know you touched on it before that you would still like getting to Watford, but will you be playing less of Watford if Hart ends up playing?
Yeah, first I'll probably be playing like no Watford. The problem is that it's hard to find a true late swap with him, right? So like if you look in just that game, because it's the last game of the night, you could pivot to Shaden Sharp at 3,500. Or you could go to like, I guess Walker Kessler is probably your next best bet. Like it's a pretty steep drop off. So I do not want to be in a position where I have like a ton of Watford that I need to try and get out of. It's going to be a tough swap.
Yeah, I mean, he is in, I rear my lineups. I have Watford in none of them now. Like Watford, once I put Josh Hart back in, I got to none of Watford, which
yeah. I mean, that's reasonable if you're expecting Hart to play. And typically when a guy is upgraded from doubtful to questionable, I expect him to be in the lineup. I think it's pretty reasonable to just not play him tonight.
Yeah, so I had Watford projected for 20, I think it was like 25 fantasy points before, and now it's at 14. So it's obviously a massive difference. I think if we were to see Hart get rolled out, then obviously it would make sense again. But for now, he just doesn't. All right, let's see if we had any other questions in the Discord channel, which we do not for now. We talked about some of the guards that we're playing, Matt. Who are the forwards now that you are getting the most exposure to? KJ Martin moving up the list for me now with the absence of Watford as a value play. Pascal Siakam is somebody who I like a whole bunch. Mo Wagner, I get to more of him now. Also, that trend in Watford has been taken out of the mix for me. Those are really the most important pieces for me. Martin, Siakam, and Wagner. How about for yourself?
Yeah, all of a sudden, forward seems a lot weaker than it did, a half an hour ago, right? Because Watford and Anderson were considered like two of the premier values on this slate. And I don't really like either of them. I mean, I still have Kyle Anderson, but I don't like him nearly as much. To me, this just solidifies Mo Wagner night, baby. I am going to end up so disgustingly overweight on Mo Wagner that it can only end poorly, I think. But, that's just he's a guy that I want to be overweight on tonight. I have some Kenyon Martin Jr. I have Justice Winslow. I have some Anthony Edwards. I have some Jeremy Grant. But for the most part, it is going to be the Mo Wagner show for me at power forward, at least.
Yeah, I think Wagner, really, really strong value option. A little more so on FanDuel than DraftKings, but still good play on both sites. But like I said, also KJ Martin, particularly because of some of the position eligibility of Martin, the small forward and power forward at that kind of price tag, it's pretty favorable. So Martin, definitely somebody that I like getting to more now than I did earlier. And then anything else you want to talk about at the forward spot that we've not yet mentioned?
I will say that after I updated my Minnesota projections, Wendell Moore is grading out as somebody that I have lineups of, right? Like, again, he hasn't been a bad per minute guy when he has seen the floor this year. I don't know exactly how many minutes he's played. I can't imagine it's very many, but he's a starter that I have projected for 20 minutes at the minimum. Like, he is now somebody that I'm playing. My Kyle Anderson exposure has been turned way down. My Jalen Noel exposure has gone way down. I now have Noel projected for 20 minutes. So I think that, the guys that were chalk for Minnesota at the start of this show, I think they are now good candidates to be underweight on. If the rest of the field is not adjusting, I think we want to be even more underweight than maybe we would normally want to be. And, if Kyle Anderson or Jalen Noel burns me tonight, so be it.
Yeah. And by the way, because people are saying on the injury report, Josh Hart is still listed as doubtful. There hasn't been an injury report update from before. The reason I think he's questionable is because before there was a press conference where I was just trying to find information about it on Twitter from before, where it was when there was the update that Eubanks was not going to play. It was Josh Hart is uncertain for tonight. I read uncertain as to mean questionable in that sense.
I've got a beat reporter here for Portland who has him as a game time decision.
Which, by the way, game time decision doesn't mean anything to me. If somebody's a game time decision, I generally just lean back on, okay, game time decision, but probable. I expect them to play. Game time decision, but doubtful. I expect them to not play. When the coach says that they're uncertain if he's going to play or not, I read that as questionable.
To me, game time decision has a bit more. Like, if someone goes from it was doubtful and they're now a game time decision, like, in my eyes, that's an upgrade.
I don't view it that way because game time decision isn't a designation on the injury report.
I understand.
But with that said, when I see him say that it's uncertain, and the other thing too is there hasn't been an injury report update since that press conference, so I just assume I'm viewing him as questionable now. So we'll see what ends up happening. If he gets ruled out, I'll take him out. I'll end up putting Watford back into some lineups. Centers for me, the players that I'm getting the most at, it is Nurkic and Gobert, and then Siakam and Wagner also at center eligibility. But the guys who are just centers, it's Nurkic and Gobert for me. Anybody off the beaten path that you're rostering at center?
Şengün at 6,200. I mean, the price has come down quite a bit. We know about the talent of this guy, right? He's averaging 1.23 DraftKings points per minute this season. He's going to bounce back at some point. And I think that he's a nice leverage play off of, some of the chalkier centers. So I have, I would imagine I'm going to be overweight on Şengün. I'm going to be overweight on Nurkic, and I'm going to be underweight on Gobert.
Okay. So let's see anything else from your lineups, because we're about to get into the post-lock show. We'll look at some of our favorite bets for the night as well. And we going over anything that happened in terms of late scratches, lineup changes, what ends up happening with Josh Hart. Hopefully we'll have all that in the next 30 minutes. If you guys want access to all of our tools, 3 days for free if you sign up by clicking on the link below. So trial period. If you're unsure whether you want to test out projections, player projections, all the tools, boom bust tool, 3 days for free, zero risk for you. And you can find out if it is tools that you like using or not. Anything else that we've not talked about that surprised you, or anything unexpected when you built your lineups and submitted them?
I didn't think that I would necessarily have exposure to him, even at the minimum, but I think part of it is small forward being kind of just a bit of a dumpster fire. And, taking Watford out of the equation, like we kind of are looking for a little bit of value. So Moore was the big shock to me, but it's an all-in Jordan Poole and Mo Wagner night. And if those guys bust, I'm in trouble. But if those guys go off, I think I'm going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, so we'll see what ends up happening. Slate is locking right now. I'll be interested to see what some of the what some of the ownership is for the first game, and let's see what ends up happening also with any of the overall just the results. But let's talk about some bets. Tyler, could you pull up Odd Shopper? And Matt and I will look through some of the bets from some of the later games. I already talked about how I like over 4.5 rebounds for Kevin Porter Jr. Now, we only have 2 games to talk about for later. We've got Houston, Golden State. We've got Portland, Utah. Pull up Odd Shopper, and we'll see what bets stand out. Do you have any bets that you placed for today, by the way?
I did not. I have no NBA bets.
I didn't
my
check.
Saturdays are typically, this is when I really start diving into like NFL props and stuff. And I get some of my final bets in on sides for NFL. But one that just jumped out right now, looking at Odd Shopper, might be a little bit obvious, but I'll take the over on Steph Curry at 28.5 points. The guy's averaging like 32 points per game this season. He's shooting 50, 40, 90 again. He's on pace. Here's a little trivia. You want some NBA trivia?
Hit me with some trivia.
He is trying to become the third.
Nash has to be one.
Steve Nash is one.
How many do you say there are in total?
There's only one more.
Okay, so Steve Nash. Did Dirk do it?
I think Dirk did it once.
Okay. Steve Kerr?
Steve Kerr, I believe, also has done it once.
All right, Clay hasn't done it. Trae Young definitely hasn't done it. I'm trying to think.
Harden, you gotta go older. You gotta go older.
Older? Is it going to be somebody who got there on really shitty low volume?
Nope.
Reggie Miller? No, I don't think he ever shot over.
He
50.
did it once, but not twice.
I feel like I'm doing good with this without getting the right.
You're doing good. You're doing better than I would have done.
Tyler said John Stockton. Is it Stockton?
It is not John Stockton.
I don't think he was a great 3-point shooter. If anybody in chat, I would like to open it up to chat, except I know they're just going to look up the answer and cheat. But if anybody in chat wants to play the game honestly, throw in some answers. So
I will say that the 3-point volume for this guy was probably not great because it had like just come around. But
So give everybody the prompt again. What's the question Bean Dude just asked? And I think that's good. What's the question? And then people from there could answer. Jake Swales is saying KD. I don't
50, 40, 90 club, meaning over 50% from the field, over 40% from 3-point range, and over 90% from the free throw line. Curry is on pace currently to do it for the second time in his career. Only 2 other players have done it multiple times.
Brandon Katz says
Greg,
Tim Legler.
Not Tim Legler. Greg already got Steve Nash. Steve Nash actually did it 4 times. And we are looking for the second player with multiple 50, 40, 90 seasons.
By the way, are we lagging, Tyler? People are posting about that in the chat. Yes. All right. Well, it is what if it is it like unwatchably bad? You're muted. So. All right. If it's terrible, maybe we'll cut out in a few minutes, but we'll keep pushing through for now. Somebody guessed Larry Bird.
That's the answer.
Is it Larry Bird? Yeah, that was a good guess. So Larry Bird, I don't want to shit on old timers, but I actually didn't think it was him. He came to mind, except I remembered the last time I looked, he was like much less efficient from 3 than I would have thought.
Yeah, he did it. This was towards the end of his career. He did it in back-to-back seasons. He did it in 86, 87 and 87, 88. And again, we're talking, he had 220-ish attempts. When Steph did it, he had 886 attempts. So
surprisingly, if you look at Larry Bird's career, like he was a barely above average 3-point shooter by today's standards, by efficiency. Yeah. He shot like 37% from 3. If I'm not mistaken, what's league average now? 36%?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So towards the tail end of his career, yeah. So that last season, it wasn't the last season. It was in, you said 86, 87 and 84, 85.
86, 87, 87, 88.
87, 88. Okay. No, he did it in 86, 87. Okay. He did it. Didn't he do it in one other year? Oh no, you know why? 84, 85, he didn't shoot 90% from the line. That's what I was missing. I was focusing.
That's what kills more people than you would think, is the 90% at the free throw line. That's so hard to do. Like even for an NBA player, like a good free throw shooter is in the mid 80s usually.
You know who I think is let me check to make sure he did it. Who's the most random player you could think of that had a 40, 50, 90 season?
Well, I know the whole list because I was looking at it while I was doing this. I would say Malcolm Brogdon is probably the most random.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought Jose Calderon did it one year.
He might not have had enough volume to qualify on like the league leaderboard. But yes, he was a notoriously efficient shooter.
Yeah, Calderon for his career shot 47% from the field, 41% from 3, 87% from the free throw line. And I think he also has either the record or close to the record for most consecutive made free throws. He had one year where he shot like 99% from the free throw line.
Yeah. The guy was wet. He just was like the most unathletic point guard that played in that era.
By the Brandon Katz, this might be the worst take ever, that Steph Curry couldn't play in the 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, his game would look way different. But Steph Curry's just a really freaking good basketball player. I think he would have found a way wherever you put him.
I've done this rant before. I don't really feel like doing it again, but there's too much of, I think there's too much romanticization of when people like, this is what things were like when I was a kid. So they just kind of gravitate towards it. The reality is just, do you believe in evolution or do you not believe in evolution? Changes were made in basketball. Were they for the better or were they for the worse? Improved diet, improved knowledge about most efficient shots, improved workout, improved sleep. It's either, do you think those things made players better or did they not? And I just think they do. And I think there's going to be more evolutions in the next 15, 20 years. They're going to make it so the best players of today probably wouldn't be the best players for 20, 30 years from now. That's like the synopsis version of it. It's based on evolution.
Yeah, that said, 20 to 30 years from now, there's going to be some kid trying to tell me that LeBron James wasn't good and couldn't play in 2050, and I'm going to get upset about it. So I understand.
And here's, because I like to think I'm hip and I move with not really, but I, in terms of information with sports, I try to adapt and learn new things. And I do think that whatever, like you see somebody like Wembanyama who's coming into the league now. Like, what the fuck? Like, the guy's ridiculous. He's 7'6". He's got, what's his wingspan, like 8.5 feet or something like that. He could handle the ball. He could pass. He's a shooter. There's just going to be more people that evolve to have that kind of skill set. And so a little bit in the future, I assume though that LeBron James of his peak would still be very good for, 30, 40 years from now, just not the same as he would have been in his era. That's just how evolution works to me.
Yeah, that's fair. Greg breaking out the science.
Yeah. So it's just a evolution based argument. That's where I stand with it. Let's get back to the bets though. Tyler, I know that was a little bit belated, but let's go to Odd Shopper and see what bets stand out for tonight and what is still on the board that we could potentially take advantage of. Once again, only 2 games remaining on the slate.
Right. So I did get sidetracked, but Steph Curry over 28.5 points, averaging 31 a game right now. The numbers haven't been great with Clay off the floor, but I still think that in general, that's going to be a slight upgrade for him. And most important is just the matchup with the Rockets, right? I mean, they're 28th in defensive efficiency right now. The Warriors are currently implied for over 120 points. Like, it's just hard to see Steph Curry not hit his scoring average as long as this game stays competitive.
We got a super chat. Tyler Sappington wants to know, can we dive into some PrizePicks props in these post shows? So yes, by the way, the reason last year we had a lot more shows that were sponsored by PrizePicks, and I don't even know if anybody cares for me to go behind the wall on some of this, but we have different people that sponsor different shows. Some of them competitors of PrizePicks. So it's a scenario for today. It's no issue. We could talk about PrizePicks and find some of our favorite props over there. The reason we don't do it every show is there sometimes we just can't because a competitor of PrizePicks might be sponsoring. But for today, we'll talk about BetMGM, and then we'll BetMGM sponsoring. We could talk about sports betting in general, and then we'll hit on PrizePick. Josh Hart just ruled out, so there we go. I could go back, and I have to update
game time decision.
All right, time to go back, and this is going to be easy swap though. Josh Hart back to 0 fantasy points, and then I remember Trent Watford. Let's update him. Update my lineups. So Watford goes right back into play now, and nothing really changed here. At least nothing changed versus what it was prior to me thinking Hart might have played.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that changed is now my lineups have locked.
Yeah, some of them have locked, and those ones. But I don't mind that I got to more of. So here's what's going to happen as I update my lineups, because I know what they were before. I'm going to end up getting to less of KJ Martin when I update right now, and then I'm going to get to Watford ends up back into lineups. That's what's going to happen, because I didn't have a whole bunch of KJ Martin before the news that I thought Josh Hart might have played, and now when I update, I get to So Watford is now in 45% of my lineups.
I want to see you. Are you curious in some ownerships from that first game? I'm a little bit surprised at who the highest owned player is.
So we have 2 games going on: Orlando, Toronto, OKC, Minnesota. I would assume the highest owned player is it not Noel?
Noel is 4th.
Oh, okay. Wow. Wagner
is 3rd.
Russell
is 5th.
Gobert
is 2nd. Anthony Edwards is the highest owned player on the slate.
Interesting. So I'm going to have less of Anthony Edwards now. Well, I mean, not now because obviously I can't change the lines, but I've a lot. I'm pulling up the slate now. I have a lot less of Edwards in the field has if he's that popular.
Yeah, he's at 41% roughly. And this is in the $15 DraftKings tournament.
I think I had like 20% of Edwards. Yeah, so about half of what the field has on him.
Yeah. Edwards 41, Gobert a little bit less. Wagner is 40. Noel is 34. Russell 31. Slow-Mo 27. Siakam 20. Van Vliet 20. SGA 19. And Jaden McDaniels.
Kenyon Martin have higher upside than Watford? Looks like he's had big games with no Gordon and Tate. I prefer Watford for tonight. I have more exposure to Watford. Martin playable, but I prefer Watford.
Yeah, I think Watford's just a little bit safer. I don't hate it if you prefer Kenyon Martin, but I think Watford's just a little bit safer. Maybe a smaller, wider range of outcomes.
Yeah, so let me see what the by the way, the ownership gap between those players, it was very minuscule. So I do feel like the way you asked me was a little bit misleading. So like, who's the most, like the difference between Noel, Edwards, Gobert, Wagner, it's very slim. They're almost all identically owned.
Yeah, I know. I just like to play games. You know, I wanted you to guess.
Yeah.
It's fun. Who doesn't like to play games, Greg?
Yeah. But if I would have just guessed the number, that would have been, I still would have not been right on Edwards, but like Noel, I still would have guessed the number around that mark. Like when you told me that he was the 5th most popular player, I thought that meant that he was like 25% owned or something like that. He's just as, I mean, we're talking about a difference between like him and the most popular player, I mean like 2 percentage points.
He was 34 and Edwards was 41. So 7%. All right.
Yeah. He's still popular though. Like I thought all of a sudden there was going to be some weird, not popular, which is not the case, but all right, let's try to find these bets now. And then we'll get to Tyler's question, try to find some PrizePicks props that we like as well. We've got tools for that over at Stokastic. So for me, in terms of bets, is there anything I like other than Kevin Porter Jr. and his rebounds? So these other games, this is locked. I like over 3.5 rebounds for Jordan Clarkson. We've seen a lot of weird numbers that have gotten posted with Clarkson, either in terms of him having really low assist props or rebound props. And I thought there was a chance that we were going to see Mike Conley back for the Utah Jazz. They haven't given an update on him forever, but this was about when he was going to be back. And when the injury report didn't come out earlier, I thought that was a sign of, oh, look, this could be Mike Conley's return game. Well, Jordan Clarkson this year is averaging 4 rebounds per game. He's had far more games where he's had 4+ rebounds than 3 or less. So I think the 3.5 rebound prop just a little bit too low for him. We were projected for 4.4 over at OddsShopper. So in a plus matchup against the Blazers, the couple extra minutes he plays without Mike Conley, I think that's a reasonable projection. And I think the 3.5 rebound prop, a little bit too low. So I like Clarkson over 4 rebounds. Is there anything else that you see on OddsShopper that you like?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Justice Winslow over 6.5 rebounds. I think that when you remove Josh Hart from the equation, like Josh Hart, we talk all the time about how he's like one of the best rebounding guards in basketball, or small forward, whatever you want to classify him at. The guy gets rebounds. I think removing him from the equation, not only does it mean more minutes for Justice Winslow, I think his efficiency on the glass goes up as well. So I think he can get to 7 boards for sure in this spot.
All right, let's address Tyler's question and look at PrizePicks, which I am pulling up right now. Some of our PrizePicks props. And actually, I want to look also at some of the fantasy point props and the over-unders that PrizePicks has. So if you guys are not familiar with PrizePicks, same exact scoring as FanDuel. Also, we do have a sign-up link for PrizePicks where if you sign up using our link, you get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. But in addition, you get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. So it comes fantasy point scores. So let me look at some of the fantasy scores for the later game. And same as FanDuel scoring. So I'm going to compare it One thing off the top of just right off the top that I've projected better that I'm going to like, over 36.5 fantasy points for Jordan Poole. No Klay Thompson. He's starting. He's averaging over 40 fantasy points in this role this year. Good matchup against the Houston Rockets. I like over 36.5 fantasy points for Jordan Poole. What do you think of that number?
It's a little aggressive. For me, that would not be a play. I would lean towards the over, but I think that that's a pretty fair number. I honestly thought you were going to pick out the same one that I did, because I also have a guy at 36.5 fantasy points that I like the over on, but his name is Jeremy Grant. I have Jeremy Grant projected for over 40 fantasy points tonight.
I don't have an issue with Grant. To me, that's just kind of a fair number, though. But I'll add my other guy. I like the over for Nurkic as well. Nurkic 35.5. I like the over on that mark. So I think between the three of us, we've got 3 overs there we like. But Nurkic, do you like the over 35.5?
Yeah, I have over on 35.5 for Nurkic.
Okay, so there's some common ground for us. We both like Nurkic. You like the over for Jeremy Grant. I'm kind of met on that one. I like the over on Jordan Poole. You're a little met on that one, but overall, we've got 3 that you could play into a player prop card there. And let me look also at some of the props that are up on PrizePicks, see if I like any of those.
I kind of, to piggyback off one that you had earlier, I kind of like Kevin Porter Jr., 28.5 points, rebounds, assists.
By the way, also, because I wanted to check to make sure, he also has an over-under 4.5 rebounds over at PrizePicks, the same as what he has on BetMGM and DraftKings. So over 4.5 rebounds for Kevin Porter Jr. Also like that over on PrizePicks. Anything else that catches your eye as you're looking through it?
Yeah, I mean, the Steph prop is live on PrizePicks too, 28.5 points. I'm fine with that. Let's see. I think you could take an over on Anthony Simons points as well. I don't have that as big of an edge, or Odds Shopper doesn't have that as big of an edge as the Curry over, but it's another exploitable matchup for a guy who, has no problem getting shots up when Damian Lillard is out of the lineup.
Quick start for a couple of guys. Rudy Gobert, 4 rebounds in the first 5 minutes of the game. Pascal Siakam also. We are a few minutes into that game. Siakam, 2 points, 2 steals, an assist, and a rebound. So Siakam off to a pretty good start. Rudy Gobert off to a pretty good start. D'Lo is off to a good start. The overall high score on the slate right now, though, Scotty Barnes and Alexei Pokusevski, but pretty good chance that Pokusevski is going to get benched in the second half for no reason whatsoever, because that's just what OKC does.
Yeah. And Poku was somebody I had in my player pool. I don't think he ended up actually making the final cut. Like, when the guy plays, he is effective. It's just the minutes. It's like he's got a bingo machine, and whatever number comes out, that's how many minutes he plays that night.
Looks like I've got a sweat here. The Hornets down 8 right now to the Bucks. So Hornets teetering on the edge there. But I want to ask you, just because you brought up something, and I think this is an interesting, fun thing we can include Chad in also. Who is the player that you are off on the most often? So which player do you think individually has cost you the most money in DFS in your career for NBA purposes? Games that you don't play enough, or somebody you end up playing a lot who just shits the bed often?
That's a good question. I am going to say the guy that randomly buries me the most. The thing is, he's not really all that relevant anymore. The first guy that came to my mind was Kyrie Irving. He's had so many of those random nights where he pops off for 60 to 70 points, and he's just not somebody that I play nearly enough. I'm almost always overweight on the guys like Giannis and Jokic and Doncic and James Harden back when James Harden was a superstar, and Russell Westbrook back when he was putting up triple doubles on a nightly basis. I'm always playing those guys. So it's the random next tier down guys that I think have burned me the most.
So for me, this year's been totally different. I end up playing a lot of Steph Curry this year relative to other years, but Curry's somebody in the past, he was always overpriced if you're just running projections, because you get these weird games from Curry where for the longest time, remember Curry before this year, he would be like 35 fantasy points, 38, 41, 42, 75. And then it would be a bunch of games also where it was like 30, 45 around there. So for the longest time, I just was not getting to a lot of lineups where I would have Steph Curry in them. And I would just get destroyed on some of the ceiling games. But at the same time, too, there were so many slates where he was overowned. But there's definitely been slates where I've just been just totally buried by Steph Curry. Clay for the same thing. Also, do you remember who was it that Clay scored 28 points in a quarter against?
Kings.
Was it the Kings? I just remember there being that slate where I was doing really well, and all of a sudden, I've never seen lineups drop faster before in GPPs because Clay was scoring so many fantasy points so easily for me. Corey Bomber saying Ant Edwards, DFS Chief, Kelly Olynyk. El Quattro Loco also saying he never gets Anthony Edwards right. But also, I think people are kind of overreacting a little bit to Edwards being really shitty so far in this game. Now, I'm going to be rooting against Anthony Edwards. We talked about some of that ownership before. But yeah, 2 points and an assist for Edwards in 7.5 minutes. Really slow start for him. So far, the offense has been D'Lo has 4 points, a rebound, and assist, and a steal. Gobert has 4 points and 5 boards, and he's at the free throw line right now. So Gobert has been playing well so far to this point. And Anthony Edwards, I do wonder how many people are just looking at the line and be like, I played Anthony Edwards tonight. He's not doing good. That's the answer, because that's kind of what it feels like.
By the way, it was the Kings for Clay, and it was 37 points in a quarter.
Was it 37 and a quarter?
37 points in a quarter.
Oh my God. I remembered it being crazy. I didn't remember it being 37 and a quarter, though. Everybody's answering Anthony Edwards now. Brad Clayton saying worst DFS guy ever is. I mean, it depends what you mean. If you're on the wrong side of him, that could definitely be your answer. Movie Hood saying Embiid spelled it in maybe his issue that Movie has that he spelled Embiid wrong.
Embiid's a good one for me. That's a good one for me. Because I always end up picking Jokic over him, So there are plenty of nights when that doesn't work out.
There was a really long stretch last year where, do you remember the crazy Embiid run where he was just going ape shit every night?
Yeah. I mean, that's when he really put himself in the MVP discussion.
Yeah, there was a time when Embiid he had like 37.5 was the over under for his points prop for a really long stretch. Because I remember it being pretty crazy. I'll see if I can find the stretch that I have in my mind. So Joel Embiid last year, looking through his game logs. Was this? Okay, yeah. So he had a stretch from December 26th to January 25th where he had 31 or more points in all but one game. There was one game against the Celtics, which was a blowout where he only scored 25 points. Every other game during that stretch, 31 or more points.
He's very good at basketball.
He had a couple of really crazy stretches last year towards the tail end of the year also, which I kind of think this fucked up the Sixers season when they were really pushing for him to try to get the MVP. And so they had him playing like 39 minutes in meaningless games to try to win him the award. So here was how he finished the regular season last year. 38 minutes against the Cavs, 44 points, 17 rebounds, 39 minutes against the Pacers bounds. And then they were like, let's run Joel Embiid into the ground. And he immediately got hurt once the playoffs started.
Yeah. If there's one thing you want to do with a 7'1" guy with foot issues, it's playing 40 minutes in meaningless games.
Joe P saying Rudy Gay whenever he was chalk. I can't remember the last time there was a Rudy Gay chalk slate.
That's a throwback.
Yeah, when is like we're talking? Were we playing DFS in 2008? I'm trying to remember. Oh, you know what? There was a Rudy Gay chalk slate last year. It was a DNP coach's decision. You remember that?
I don't, but it sounds like something was. I mean, that's a Popovich, right? He was on the Spurs last year.
No, he was on the Jazz last year. It was.
Oh, you're right.
It was. They had a game where a ton of guys were out.
Yes, you're right. I do remember that now.
So they only had 8 active players, but Rudy Gay was the token active player to make them fill out the lineup. But what it seemed like at the time was, Rudy Gay is going to play a bunch of minutes. He didn't start. And then he still played 0 minutes coming off the bench. And it was just, they only ran a 7-man rotation. And it was like Trent Forrest was really popular that night. It was like weird guys. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I said, Mie Oni, that name jumps out to me for some reason.
He was like the last guy that got minutes that day, but there was one. I'm trying to remember. There was one guy on the Jazz who went absolute apeshit that game. He scored like 35 points or something, and isn't even in the NBA anymore. And I think he only played like one more game the rest of the year or something like that.
Was it slam dunk champ Jeremy Evans or whatever that guy's name was? Do you remember him?
It wasn't him. It was.
Yeah, you're right. That guy hasn't been in the league for quite some time.
Brandon Katz saying Embiid broke a bone in his face. Yes, but he also had a knee issue in the postseason. Oh no, it wasn't. He had a hand issue in the postseason. Remember,
as an aside, that might be the lamest dunk contest ever. His like winning dunk was he like dunked over a painting that he had done himself, which I guess is kind of cool. Like, congratulations, you made a painting, but that was the winning dunk. The dunk contest is just it's in the crapper, man.
I never really enjoyed it that much, to be honest. It's not for me.